Tanuj Bhojwani is one of India's tallest minds on artificial intelligence. He currently heads People+AI, an AI initiative under the EkStep Foundation. Prior to this, Tanuj worked on DPI initiatives like Aadhaar and UPI. He's also famous for a book he co-authored with Nandan Nilekani called The Art of Bitfulness. Tanuj believes that the AI hype around us is not justified.
Hi Tanuj, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Deepak. I'm very excited to be here.
I thought a good way to start is to lay the definitional framework of what we're even talking about. Because I think you said before we started, if we have to disagree about something, we have to point at what we're disagreeing about. So what is AI? And what about AI did we get wrong as an audience?
Okay. One of the first moments that both you and I were probably too young to remember about a computer or artificial intelligence doing something better than humans would be defeating Garry Kasparov at chess.
Yeah.
Chess.
Deep Blue,
right? Like it was popular enough. And already then there was things about, how this is going to change the world. There was Watson, which defeated humans at Jeopardy. And there was this very famous Simpson meme that the loser himself put forward in the Jeopardy answer card. If you know how that format of that show goes, you write an answer, you put it face down, and then the screen in front of the contestant shows the screen. And the contestant who was like a streak winner in Jeopardy, some sort of, wizard at that game, wrote, "I for one welcome our new overlord." So something to the effect, which
I
is
have memory of this,
which is Simpson-like event. And then AlphaGo in 2017, where while a lot of us, and I remember for a little while after that, Go as a game was being talked about a lot on Twitter and being popular. Right? Like everybody's talking about Wo. This game itself is so intense and whatever. We didn't even know the game, but we know that it was very hard for a computer to beat. Yeah. And suddenly it did beat us. ChatGPT is one more of those events. I missed one actually, which is more for the nerds. ImageNet, AlexNet, which was Ilya, one of the co-founders of OpenAI, was one of the co-authors of that paper. And even that moment was really big. We'll get to why if it comes up again. So, but let's talk about that ChatGPT moment in 2022, late end of November, early December. And yeah, as much as say AlphaGo or even this Facebook Cicero, where they beat a team of 5, like AI beat someone at Dota, right? The game. Those are also great moments of AI. But even I was more shocked at ChatGPT. I think the number one reason for that is because ChatGPT allowed anybody to log in and just try it themselves. And it fundamentally broke down any perception we had come up with of what a computer can do, including people like me. And I'm not saying I'm particularly smart, but I am very much plugged into this field, right? So for me also, I have a sense of where the state of the art is and what is possible, what is not possible. So first of all, that moment was really big because the computer gave answers to questions, reasonably good answers to questions that fundamentally my mental model was a computer should not be able to do this. I think that's why it was big. I'll stop there for why that moment was big. What is artificial intelligence? So that's really what you and I have to get to.
Correct. Can I add something just before that? So something like Deep Blue beating Kasparov is monumental in the sense that it was initially thought impossible. Chess is too complex a sport for any narrow AI to be able to think through so many millions of positions and have the intuition of a human being to be able to make a move, right? Positional awareness, all that. But I think I'm thinking about this on two levels. So first, of course, is just the novelty of the technology, which I fully concede. It is quite novel. But then on a second level is an actual dent to the world. So Deep Blue came and went, and now engines help chess players play chess. So there's a dent to the world of chess, but not to the world. Not in the sense that the Industrial Revolution was or that farming was to us as a human species. And either I'm being sort of naive about where ChatGPT is, and I'm saying, it's so early in the race that it's not the sort of thing that farming is or that the Industrial Revolution is, or it will never happen. Like AI is never going to make that leap, right? So I'm sort of thinking about that. Like on the tech level, I understand it is genuinely monumental, but in terms of I think OpenAI makes a couple $2 billion in revenue per year after 3 years, right? Which is great, but lots of companies make a couple $1 billion in revenue per year. So it's not, or is it a shift to the human species as we know it? And then in line with that, what would be?
So I'm going to tell you what I've heard. My own personal belief is that it is a shift in certain things, but it is not necessarily going to be as monumental, etc. So my position on this is very different from what I'm about to say. I'm going to try and build up, steelman the argument for this idea. I think at some level, machines so far have helped us with acceleration of physical labor in some sense, right? You had machines that, like the classic example that comes to mind is the engine, the horse and the horsepower, right? Because we used to use horses for transportation. Now engines can give us that motion. We used it for locomotion, right? Typically the first trains were exactly where we thought we'll use it. But then the personal car and, eventually the airplane, because just like you're moving things, you can move a fluid over a wing, make it fly. Move, instead of rowing a boat, you are now moving a motor, etc. Electricity or energy came about, which just made energy something that's more easier to manipulate. You don't need to carry around fuel or hay or timber or whatever. You had this really compact thing, and with wires you can get it up anywhere. So it was again an accelerant to physical labor, motor stuff we had already figured out. These technologies have been labeled intelligence, and right there is a question on whether that is even the correct terminology, or is it just a great marketing sort of thing, right? Like, I'm sure you've heard of this story, death insurance versus life insurance, right? So we just named it a really cool thing, and which is why we ascribe so many values to it. One way or the other, though, it is doing something that, like I said earlier about ChatGPT, breaks our conception for what a machine should be able to do. A machine so far has been making things easier. A calculator, for that matter, was making arithmetic easier, faster. There's a physical labor of adding or multiplying, a process that's very well understood. The manipulation of symbols, a computer just does it very, 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 very fast, right? But there is a proper process to it. Similar like chess, right? Like there's a complex space to search from, but the moves are well defined. A computer is just searching through them faster. Deep Blue was just searching through them faster. So the fundamental thing that has changed, or why people are so excited about this, is because the first time, like I said, we have access to things like planning, reasoning, sort of understanding of natural language, so comprehension, you may call it that, and a few other such abilities that we never thought machines would have. If you could make this very, very cheap, you can supposedly replace human labor in a lot of places, thereby removing bottlenecks to democratizing or accelerating things that seem to be the fundamental bottlenecks to us today of scaling these things.
Right.
And hence there is great potential in this technology to change everything everywhere. You can see with how I've caveated where my possible arguments with this space and what they're claiming are. But the Steelman version of this is that, hey, a lot of the tasks that we do today are essentially intelligence, which for somebody who's doing them repeatedly seems like such an obvious thing for a computer to do.
Correct.
But it's not. Like playing chess was not.
Perfect. Okay. So now, broadly I have a sense of what you're sort of going for. I want to start at, if we think of like a triangle, at the base of the triangle. So I'm not going to make the claim to start off with that AI can at scale replace human beings. I'm going to make the claim that it can at scale make some sort of massive monumental dent to productivity. Humans who know how to use AI will just replace humans who don't know how to use AI. And these companies generate billions of dollars simply because they assist humans to do tasks faster, better, more efficiently than ever before. Is this a good claim that just on a productivity front, AI is going to be some sort of tangential shift to how we do things?
That is fairly reasonable. I think we are already seeing green shoots of this in very particular industries where, say coding, for an example. If you were writing code without AI today, it would be foolish to do.
Correct.
having said that, there is enough now studies, reports, including one that I think this came out this morning of our recording, that across a bunch of places, they found that the jump in productivity is not uniform. The less experienced folks seem to be catching up a lot better than experts, etc., using it. It is also a claim that I would like to make that most jobs, as you actually get sort of older and experienced at it, you're doing less of the job itself and somehow doing things around setting up organizations and institutions where multiple people coordinate to do that job very well.
Correct.
One tangential way in which I do believe that AI will improve productivity even more than it does for an individual coder is that when you reach a threshold where you have to reduce, where individual productivity improves even by 25%. But if that means that the size of your team shrinks by a reasonable number, the overheads of managing large complex teams comes down, which is a tremendous multiplier. So if you look at essentially the idea that anybody can write code, especially code for things that is already very easy to do, and like say a to-do app, right? Like you can probably write a to-do app today by saying, make me a to-do app that has feature XYZ. And you can even name XYZ in the terms that you and I usually call it.
Correct.
So make me a GTD philosophy of, to-do app and make sure it has all the GTD buckets. And if I just say that, it will make me an app, very likely, very good, which can be workable. The second order consequence that I actually am doubling down on is that once organizations and institutions do not have to be so large, they will all actually settle for a smaller size. It does improve productivity fractionally for some people more than the others. But if you can do the same job with a fewer number of people, the size of units that self-organize to do things goes smaller.
I don't know if I agree with the co-claim that the advent of automation that helps people do their tasks more efficiently reduces size of companies. And this is because in the past, any meaningful automation that has been introduced into the labor force has increased the size of the average successful company. So that has been a true trend. The Industrial Revolution just made companies bigger and more bloated. We have more people and more machines. And I think that's because the larger, well, at least with physical hardware, the larger the farm gets, so the larger my factory gets, the better all the efficiency figures. So, at scale, it starts making a lot more sense. And so companies that simply don't hit that scale start dying out. Companies that do hit that scale keep sort of multiplying. We've seen that trend, right? On average, big companies get bigger.
Revenue-wise, does that necessarily hold in this world people-wise?
Number of people.
I'm very specifically making a claim around the number of people.
Is that not sufficient for the AI hype to be justified? Like just a massive dent to productivity?
No, because I think there's a lot of tasks in which the AI can be productive and can do this, but there are lots of tasks in which you will never change what is happening. And I'll give you an example is healthcare, right? So let me call this the rituals around healing, right? I'm going to call it that because when you go back 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years, there were still rituals around healing. They're nothing like modern medicine, right? At some point we used to put leeches and suck blood and whatever was the ongoing theory of the body and whatever was what we did. There were rituals of healing whenever. Part of the rituals of healing is a healer. And this healer has authority in this domain. And they themselves have to go through certain, processes, something, right, to become a healer. Either they are ordained by God to be a healer, or you go study for 4, then 8, then 10 years super specialization, and you're employed by this hospital and you're registered by the state as a practicing healer or whatever. Or as in our country coexists, right? There is also healing gods and healing temples. I don't know if you know this, but in Bangalore there are these plague temples, Marama plague temples. Do you know? I
don't know about this.
Plague came here too, right? And we just made plague temples, which is in some ways both a what do you call it, like a isolation, like what's the right word that I'm looking for, but like a place for people to like be
quarantine themselves.
Quarantine. Sorry, that's what I was looking for. Like a quarantine chamber combined with religious worship. But culturally, that's what humans, like Indians that was the popular belief and culture, that you have the gods are going to bless you and that's how you heal. There is no other way for you to heal, right? So you go, but because they also recognize the principles of disease, that it spreads, that contact or like proximity is a problem. So this quarantine, but it's not called quarantine. It's not a medical term. It said I am going and devoting myself to God for the next few weeks to hope that I receive the blessings and this cures. So there is always this authority figure, because in that time of despair, having somebody whom which you plant your hope and say, this person will lead me out of this darkness, that role is going to remain necessary socially. So can you improve a doctor's productivity? Maybe they can see more patients, like laparoscopic surgery makes it possible for a knee surgeon to do way more surgeries today than they did earlier.
Got it.
Sure.
I was recently reading that there, like in double-blind trials that have you speaking to a therapist over a chat, and you don't know if the therapist is or you are told that it is a human being, but it is actually a bot on the other side, or like a learning model that's generating text. People seem to feel more comfortable with the responses that a generative model provides. Okay, now I don't know if this is true or if the test itself was well conducted, but let's say it is true.
Yes.
And let's say we were to compromise on the ethics of having to inform you as a human being that what you are speaking to is not another real human being, it is a generative model. In that case, like in the case of therapy, would not the healer become the bot?
Yes, and also no. So we're actually running this. At some point, I think maybe at some point to tell our readers what I do, and because this has got the contradiction.
There's an intro prior to this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. At some point, so let me start by saying, in my own organization, I'm running an experiment on this, right? In fact, we've taken a very narrow space where we want to make this work. Where I really want the AI to work for this is student counseling around exams, because the nature of this is that it happens in peak in one time for the whole country, right? So during the entrance exam season, all of these folks,
correct,
and just in the run up to that, they need help. I can't scale counselors and then scale them. What are they doing the rest of the year? I can't keep them on payroll, right? There is no elegant way to do this as a solution. You can say regulation, enforcement, whatever, and we know how that goes, where they'll hire whoever to be a counselor. That person may not be very skilled at it, may not be doing this, they have another job, they're getting paid peanuts. And then there'll be colleges that come up to give you cheap counselors to fill up those positions. So we know how the human economy will deal with this problem. So let's hope that AI can do better. So we are trying this ourselves. We're trying to see if the AI can be patient, can be kind, can give reassuring answers, and even there, the strategies that we are now trying to work with are we engage, and at some point, first of all, you have to be transparent for the ethics of it, that this is like correct. In that double-blind experiment, sure, you can set it up that way, but in reality, like I would really, for various reasons, have to tell people, right?
Yeah.
Both compulsion or not, I would want to. Second, even if I do that, the best case scenario is that instead of saying reassuring things that they'll take me seriously, it is our sense that people would prefer to take advice from other people, and like you want to relate to somebody else who's been there. So the bot that we're also trying is at some point goes into finding real stories of somebody else who faces that situation, have those pre-recorded and trigger the right video. Right? Again, I don't have results to tell you this works better or not. We are just in the process of building all of this stuff. But once you disclose it as a bot, do people still want to talk to it more and still want to share their problems?
Seems unlikely.
I don't know. I'm not going to make a claim that I'm not sure of. I think that there are two aspects of this ritual of healing. One is me feeling safe enough to articulate my fear, which in itself has healing value. So if creation of a bot just creates that space for most people that they don't have today. Yeah. Most people in India don't have a place where they can go and talk about their mental health without shame, without prejudice, without guilt. If this bot exists, I mean, screaming into the void would be my next best solution here, right? Like if screaming into the void was a service, you can go somewhere and scream into the void, right? That's what I'm comparing to.
And the void is seemingly human.
And the void is seemingly human. The void speaks back and tells you, hey, this is not, it's like, I literally just spoke to 1 million other people who had the same problem as you. And that, and that has some reassurance value, right? Then I will take that on also, right? I'll go back to the claim I'm disagreeing with. Is this going to be a huge boost in productivity? Maybe, maybe not. Not in this field for sure, right? Like in this, like the therapist at no point in your session is going to be like, you know what, Deepak, the next 10 minutes I'm predicting you're about to rant in a meaningless spiral. Let me just go out and make myself more productive in 10 minutes by going and talking to my other patient while my AI bot avatar talks to you. Like, do you see that interaction in therapy and therapists being more productive?
But if I, as the patient, did not know that my therapist was unavailable for 10 minutes, it had simply predicted well that I would be unavailable because I'm ranting, so I don't need his presence. The effect still holds. But I feel like I'm picking the low-hanging fruit, which is online therapy. And maybe if you give it a body, I don't know, it becomes hard to offline therapy. But I'm also thinking about medicine that has to do with physical issues. I mean,
so this is where one of the books we discussed, Elephant in the Brain, has one of my most favorite examples of human irrationality. As a kid, when you fall or bump into a table or something and you get hurt, right? Let's say there's this low table in front of you and you're a toddler running around and you bumped your knee into it and you start crying, you start wailing. Your parent, say your mother, comes in and does a ritual of healing with you, which is she will soothe you. She will do one or two things. She will ask you where it hurts, kiss the spot where it hurts, or ask what hurt you, and it is an inanimate table, right? And say, that table hurt you, bad table, and slap the table.
Perfect. Yeah.
You've seen this?
Yes.
Child soothes, calms down, right? What did the mother do that is of medicinal value?
I mean, beyond something psychological, not a lot.
Correct. So now the question that where you and I are differing is that in therapy, can a bot do the psychological thing? And I am saying no, because there is this value to that, to the thing, to that psychological act being done by a human, right? Till we reach a world where, like, say, what was that, Big Robot 6 or one of those movies where you actually look at, like, or Isaac Asimov, where we start looking at these creatures as embodied autonomous friends, right? It's very hard for me to imagine that. In fact, to the extent that, let me make a different claim, right? HAL 2000 or some of these disembodied systems, to take them seriously was harder than, say, iRobot or, the others where there is a robot that comes to you. And like these many years in the future, every time you have to make a sci-fi series where there is an, autonomous bot or intelligence, or what's the latest one? Marvel. The guy Vision with the diamond in his head and the soul stone, right? Like, look at how our mythologies around these are. We first anthropomorphize these creatures.
Correct.
Then we say they don't have this essential element, which is a soul, and then we'll give it to them. And only then do they have the redemption arc, right? Like, it is in our mythos to, like, have this difference between sort of...
There is something about being human. When you mentioned iRobot, I was thinking actually, it's one of my favorite movies. And there are two automated beings, let's say. One is Sunny, who is the robot who becomes enlightened. And then there's Vicky. Vicky is the one that floats around everywhere. And And for some reason, I have lots of feelings about Sunny.
Correct.
I feel like Sunny is almost human.
Yes.
But Vicky, although it is exactly Sunny because it runs on the same that central spine that they have in the building, doesn't feel human at all because she is just a face that appears when you have to speak to it.
Are you getting it, right? Like, there's something about embodiment that to me has a lot to do with autonomy and a debate that I hope we get into later about agency, as opposed to what these AI agents are, right? And I think somewhere we refuse to acknowledge as autonomous individual beings till we see an embodiment.
Here's a hypothetical, because a lot of this has to be that You have cases where children are born with only a brainstem, but no functioning brain. I mean, it's very hard to conclude that they're conscious, but the brainstem ensures that they have a beating heart, peristalsis, just all those involuntary functions continue to happen. If you could somehow download GPT 4.0 as it sits today into this brain, I don't know what the tech looks like, but let's say it's possible. Now it grows, it's a human, it looks, I mean, it has the body of a human, but effectively silicon in the head.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if what's missing from GPT or Claude is simply a body. Is that all that's missing?
Again, let me steelman your argument, right? There is a whole cadre of apps called AI girlfriends.
Yeah.
Which are arguably, after coding or maybe more than coding, one of the most profitable use cases of AI.
Yeah.
Compared to an average session time I heard on ChatGPT of 8 minutes, on character.ai, the average session time is 24 minutes. So there is something about an embodied AI, so an AI pretending to be a real person, even when it is not necessarily physically embodied, but somebody at least making an effort to make themselves as an independent, autonomous being, especially if they are socially interacting with you beyond task fulfillment. Right?
Yes.
I am my own person with an individuality, some personality, some whatever, and I'm trying to talk to you or have this thing. Again, user initiates, but is clearly is hitting more checkboxes with humans on average. So, to your point, if we could do such a thing where we've tricked our brains, right? Like virtual reality is causing vertigo in people when they wear it and go to things. So, if you wear a headset that makes you think you're on a roller coaster and your body starts responding to that, congratulations, you've crossed that barrier of uncanniness into like reality. Yeah. But at some level, if I lift this headset up, this goes away. Right? This is my point, right? Like if you do this, it will really fool a lot of people and it becomes easier to get past.
But it's still fooling people.
You're still fooling people.
It is not objectively a human being at this point.
Correct. I mean, and I think nobody is making the claim that these systems become human. I think what people are making the claim is that these systems are going to be so powerful and so good and so much better than us that all these little things we get into and these foibles and these mistakes and, stuff like that will stop, because these are super intelligent beings who will chase these goals with purity and deliver abundance to humanity and discover new science and, stop this economic purpose. We'll just live off UBI because they are doing everything and we're sitting and relaxing.
Yeah.
Those utopias are many, many holes that I can poke.
Okay.
Right? I don't think in that lower level of, does it make us more productive? Yes. Like a calculator makes us faster. A computer allows us to abstract away and take away a lot of tasks, stuff that we didn't even believe would happen with a mechanical box. Like the first computers, we were discussing this, right, were just trying to accelerate the calculations required to calculate trajectories of missiles. Computers was a human job. It was not a machine. It was when we made these boxes and somebody asked, what does your box do? Oh, it does what this job does, right? Like it's a computer, right? Because the computations are done by it. And then eventually we learned with abstractions and, Claude Shannon, who really first put out this idea that everything is information. So everything can be represented in bits and bytes, right? So then Turing plus Shannon got together. Turing, obviously, for his idea of Turing machines, the fact that any symbols can be manipulated by this machine indefinitely, and any program can be done if you have these basic rules around the machine. And then we built Turing machines, then Shannon came and did this, then von Neumann architecture. All three of these men met because of the World War, right? So there's another whole side quest that we can talk about, which is, what does it take for great scientific progress to happen? But anyway, coming back to this idea that essentially these continue to be machines, right? This is still an engine or whatever. It is accelerating certain processes. We are ascribing a lot of values, a lot of behavior, a lot of models to it to understand, to grapple with it. partially this comes from the fact that these technologies are broadly called intelligence of some sort. That is where I would think this sort of, and that's really for me, where the buck stops, right? Like, is it really intelligent? What does that mean? Whether it is super general, other things you can still argue, right? Like, but what is that intelligence that we are ascribing to it?
One way to look at that and answer that, and so I want to push back, is I think there is some value to an idea. Gravity is an idea, and again, we were prepping before this podcast started, and we were talking about, for example, how if during the time of Aristotle you built a learning model, its data set would reflect that the word gravity means something like the natural place that an object belongs. So why does an apple fall to the floor? Because its natural place is the earth. And it takes a Newton to say something like, no, we have this thing called gravity that attracts apples towards it. And at the time, a learning model would just say that was gravity. And then it takes an Einstein to say that we have the curvature of space-time. And that is why things move towards each other, which is a novel and new idea. And the last 200 years, we've seen something like a 2-3% gross world product growth on average. And every meaningful boost has come out of some new idea, like a transistor is an idea, the internet is an idea. Okay. And AI could be thought of as an infinite number of human beings, right? For example, so for example, if all the tech was doing was replacing computers, and I'm talking about the original computers, people who do math by hand, you could spin up an infinite number of computers, machine computers, to replace human computers. Could we create an infinite number of idea generators? And if true, then that sort of changes the paradigm, right? Because then you meaningfully have a source of creating those brand new ideas that we have not thought of yet, but do tangentially change the world that we live in.
Yes and no. Gravity per se would be very hard to invent, like you're arguing.
Yeah.
But let's say new proteins, right? Which is essentially a search space. There is, there are these ideas of, what roughly, like, the universe in some sense of atoms, right? Or that could exist. It just keeps getting complex from there. But let's say one of the things that they did very recently was this, I forgot what it's called, alpha proto or alpha something like that.
The protein folding experiment, is that the right one?
Yeah, but that's alpha fold, where you're trying to fold a protein.
Right.
You know what you want, you're trying to fold it in a way that the structure is stable. Then there's another one, which is basically what we needed for the vaccines, right? We needed a specific protein which binds to a specific receptor.
Okay.
So finding candidate molecules that can then bind to that specific receptor, knowing the general rules of chemistry, going through an infinite search space, and then the computer simulating which one would work, rather than how we've done it so far, which is experimenting. That recently happened.
We have to then agree on a terminology. Is that an idea, or is that an output? So the original idea is a human thought idea.
Yeah.
That, hey, this is possible.
Yeah.
What we have is a computation problem.
Yeah.
So humans may be slower at this than a computer is. And so it is helping with computation to arrive at a solution that we think exists. Correct. The idea having originated in the brain of a human being.
Yes. So, and this is the deep blue problem. This is the deep blue version of the problem, right? Like all chess moves that were ever done were recorded, stored, whatever. And from there, even in a new chess book play, which it has not seen before, it can do a little bit of novel. Okay, if I move this here, now in this new position, so I look at all my possibilities. I, change, like go through the tree of each possibility. I say, okay, I move my bishop now, I move my horse now, whatever. And wherever I end up next, I go back and look for that in the set of all the chess moves I've seen before. And through this, I try to find which one of them is the most likely to make me win, right? So there's a defined set of rules and actions for what exists, what is possible. In a completely unknown setting, in a place where the idea of, what lies beyond our planet or what is completely unexplored, for an AI to come up with that seems very, very far-fetched for me. Why it seems far-fetched is also because at some level, at least the current set of technologies we have for AI I understand the math behind them somewhat, and it just does not, while I can even explain the, oh my god, the mental model of what a ChatGPT was broken, and then when I looked at the math and what is different, what they've done, it makes sense. Okay, this can work. We just never imagined it would work at this scale so well. But what you're describing right now in terms of discovering gravity, I cannot see how the math we have can ever lead to that today.
Is that simply an architecture problem? So if we didn't use a transformer, an example I want to give you is Deep Blue is nothing like Stockfish. Stockfish is today one of the best chess engines, but nothing about its constitutional features is similar to the way Deep Blue computed chess positions.
Yeah.
The output looks similar.
Yeah.
So a human-like interfacing AI tool that is built on some fundamentally different architecture not yet discovered, could that produce novel ideas? Or are you discounting from the face of that in the realm of possibility, it is hard to get silicon to come up with novelty?
So this is the place where I have to put my neck on the line, right? Because this is a deep question about unknown. So humility would prompt me to say, hey, don't commit to something that is like so obscure that it can possibly happen. Like I was telling you in the prep, that right now what I understand is that we're doing sort of digital math, right? Like we're coming down to zeros and ones and the operations we can have on those. When you do have the ability to have sort of qubits, I don't even fundamentally yet have a mental model for what all can change and how much, right? I know certain things like cryptography done in certain ways which were hard earlier are easier, right? I know that certain optimization problems which were, NP hard and like traveling salesmen or whatever can be probably solved in sublinear time. I know these mental models about this, but can, let's say, a new architecture come in that is genuinely learning abstractions and concepts in a weird way, can generate ideas and cut them down to what is actually physically possible, and then from there create a new idea? Maybe, but it to me, the evidence of something like that, at least right now, I can't see any. Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of, so then somebody will push back and say, but I have seen novel things. I have seen things that no human could have come up with, like, I made the girl with the pearl earring, but with a robot, right? Like, because it's one of the paintings I have in office. So in our office, we have a lot of these AI generated art where I've tried to like, just to, again, get you to ask that philosophical question. We have a lot of classical art, but in those scenes there are robots, right? So like the biggest sort of the 5 foot by 4 foot painting that we have when you enter the office is the Mona Lisa, but a robot, right? It's the idea that was very appealing to me, right? This enigmatic figure, we don't know who this is, but it is. And you look at it and you can very easily see the Mona Lisa. That painting does not exist, ever. When I went in and typed, actually my partner Varsha, she went in and she typed that prompt, and when she typed that prompt, before that, this had not existed. This exact painting, this exact prompt did not exist.
Yeah.
But is it novel?
I think it ties back that example on the protein front as well, right?
Yeah.
It is computation and remixing.
Correct.
That's the claim that you're making.
Yes.
And not effectively a novel idea.
Yes.
I want to go on a small sidetrack here because episode 1 with Manoj, he made a claim that I have since been thinking about quite a bit and I'm quite convinced by, which is that AI art is not art. It doesn't meet the threshold, the definitional threshold for what art is.
Yeah.
Because art requires an artist, not a prompt inputter.
Yeah.
Just as an aside, what do you think about this? Do you even think this is a fair
I did listen to that episode, and at that point I was, quite like, I found myself appreciating what he's saying but disagreeing, right? Because let's take DJs, right? Like, this is, sometimes I have to also appreciate, like, I realize now, maybe Deepak, I was just asking your age before we started this. I don't know if you don't want your readers to know this, but you're 27, I'm 35, right? This already makes a huge difference to our worldview and how we look at things. Today, I see a lot of kids somehow who are into DJing, right? And I look at that whole thing as, boss, you're not playing an actual instrument, right? You're using a computer to record something and then loop it and then add one more layer, and then you're sampling something, and then you're just like doing this, random scratching on what should have been a vinyl record. Like that's where you get it from, but you don't even know what how vinyl records used to work, all of that. So I find myself in the position of the old man shaking a fist at these younger generation now more often than I would like, right? But I was only 8 years ago when I was sitting where you are, I would look at all of this as wow, and this thing. And I can't deny that there is a bunch of people who pay for the privilege of listening to these people do this computer manipulation of sounds, right? Like digital files,
as opposed to vocal cord manipulation or strings on
instrumentation, or hitting things on a percussion instrument or whatever, right? At what point is my take better or more superior, right? Like it is ridiculous, right? The idea that art is the ability to express yourself in one half and then for that to be perceived. And quite often these two don't even agree, right? So you may have heard of that famous example, right? Where the teacher asked the students, what did this author, what was the symbolism of this in that book and whatever. And so one kid
the blue curtains.
The blue curtains. And the kid just decided to mail someone and says, I don't fucking know, it was blue curtains, right? Like that was it.
Yeah.
And that is a great example of how as a species, what we do and what we value is never going to be fully captured by a machine. Because inherent in that act of producing and inherent in the act of then sort of, consumption of whatever, like anything you produce, forget labeling it art or not, right? Like I am producing an output, whether it is text, image, whatever. I have produced somehow an output and I have used tools to do it. But when I put that output into the world and say, hey, look, I express myself with this, and others come in and look at that and be like, oh, I see your expression. And from this is what I inherently feel. And hence here is my reaction, which can be outrage, which can be, which can be sort of adoring, which can just be laughing at it, which can be whatever. It could be, yes, we can from Obama, which is not Obama's photo, but then Obama's photo made into that very specific, like, almost monochrome, like two-tone colors with that yes, we can written in bold, which becomes a symbol. Now, what about that is symbolic? Can you describe to a computer? Was that not part of the zeitgeist at that time? The fact that coded into that image were ideas like, this is a black man. If he becomes president, it is truly the beginning of a new era. Right?
And what it feels to feel the feeling of something with that gravitas, potentially.
Correct. You can't. I don't know how we are ever going to teach a computer that. I sincerely do not. I know that it can parrot a lot of it if you give it analysis, right? So if you give something that has been written about extensively by humans, and you send an image and you say, please analyze this critically on the basis of culture, I'm sure it'll come up with a lot of things that we are saying. But to even create that moment of novelty, right, where some candidate comes in and positions themselves as a symbol of hope, is that something that a computer can generate and generate coherently, successfully, all the time, intelligently? I don't know. I mean, you can once again have a bunch of random generations, and one of these can be, an Obama like yes we can moment. But then if it is not the first and consistent generation that it does, would you call it intelligent? Or would you call it lucky? Would you call it a guesser?
Yeah. Now I have a thought experiment that I think addresses this. So you said a collection of random outputs that an automation could produce.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make the case that you don't even need a generative model to produce unique ideas. An automation could do it, right? And the easiest way to think about this is the total library, the library of Babel.
Yes.
So for listeners unfamiliar, the way it would work is, let's say that you want to produce every single book that could possibly be written in the language of English that's under 10,000 pages. And the way you would do this is you'd show a computer all the possible words that we have, and then you'd start printing every single book. And this is a very large library. It has like a 10 power 200, 300 odd books inside this library. But it contains every permutation, every combination of all the words that could possibly exist in the English language under 10,000 pages, as an example. And so what ends up happening is The Merchant of Venice is a book under 10,000 pages, which means The Merchant of Venice exists in this Library of Babel. Every book ever written by any author ever, as long as it contains those characters and those letters in English, will exist in this library somewhere. It then also is logical to assume that every book that will ever be written. So if I were to produce that library today, and then 2 weeks from now you write a paper, that paper that you wrote, if you predict, I don't know, a Higgs-like particle in your paper, will exist in this Library of Babel. So it is not impossible for an automation to produce new and novel ideas. It has been produced and it exists somewhere in the ether, right? In this big library, there's like a couple million useful pages. And let's say then that we use now a generative model or like a GPT-like sort of tool that we have that exists today that simply understands syntax and grammar to read through all of these books in the library and discard those that don't make any sense. Right? That we can do. So it will just say, look, here are books that are not even coherent. Like this collection of characters, these words, not coherent, doesn't adhere to grammar. And we whittle it down to a couple million books that are coherent, can be read end to end and form a sentence that is correct. Now you have to line up a queue of human beings and issue them book after book. And the humans just read these books and then end up putting their hand up and say, hey, I have one that is like better than it's Shakespeare, but if he didn't die too early. Or here is like a paper that, it's physicists reading things that are potentially physics papers and saying, I have one that's actually a novel idea here. Now the identification that the idea was novel came from a human being, but the idea didn't generate in the brain of a human. It generated through automation and then like a syntax checking tool. We could, right? We could have, you could have machines that generate novel ideas.
I mean, and you do. Like, this is my AI art example, or you're absolutely right, random text generation, random whatever. And in fact, at some level, the current set of AI models that we have are not very far away from what you're saying, but they're doing it more efficiently, because what you just described requires first generating every text
Correct.
in the world and then eliminating by human energy, both expensive tasks. So a better way to go about doing it would be to start now being smart about the probability of, if I write right, and then the next word is likely to be only these, because these are the only words that start with or whatever will come after an and if I say an, it will be vowel.
Sorry, but just there's nuance here that I think I've not articulated well. When we spoke about something like gravity, and we said that postulating a space-time curvature is something that but I'm saying that somewhere in this library is a paper that postulates space-time curvature.
Correct.
So which the model you are presenting to me can't do. Like one of the faults of a GPT-like model is its data set doesn't even contain something like this idea. And so it remixes, but it can't create something
But then
novel.
the other thing is that when you want to eliminate from this vast space, come down, you also need humans who are sort of well-versed with that space. The example that's coming to my mind, maybe because I am influenced by your space-time curvature idea, is Niels Bohr, right? So have you heard of the phrase, science proceeds one funeral at a time?
Yes,
Progress is one funeral at a time, right? And this was the classic sort of thing that happened around Einstein's time, right? That Einstein just vehemently opposed quantum physics, right? Like God does not play dice with the universe.
Yeah.
And therefore a lot of quantum progress, even though humans could read something that probably existed about quantum then, but you did not agree with it, and you do not, like, or heliocentricity, right? The idea that Galileo could come up with the correct words for the fact that we rotate around the sun, but like it was the most humans would disagree.
This is like a group think that embeds into the culture that simply prevents you from even being able to acknowledge the idea as possible.
Correct. And so there is, it's not that simple. Like this is that. So as much as I am one of the people that people would like to think are the tech bros and the techno optimists, and like my credentials unfortunately also support that belief, right? Like I have done a robotics company and all of that, and I've studied engineering. that's just a ridiculous worldview. If you believe that the truth is as simple as, 1 and 0, and that as soon as it is produced, it will be evidenced and recognized, and it'll just be acknowledged and it'll spread, and that's all we need. We have to rediscover so many facts about the human condition and human existence. We've not even been able to teach ourselves not to fall for the same tricks in history all over again. I don't see where this is coming from, Deepak. Sincerely, right? It's not just, can a machine generate novel ideas? Of course, in the most dumbest way and the most expensive way and energy inefficient way, yes. Every text can be written. Does it recognize that idea as a valuable idea? Now, how would you do that without the human effort? You would create some other GPT to test it, right? This again works in certain narrow fields like chess, protein folding. This is exactly the idea. In fact, if you were to do that, then the better mechanism to do that would be an old architecture, right? Something like reinforcement learning, where you're rewarded for doing it right and not, and you hill climb and you find where it is, right? Or gradient descent. You find the minimas and maximas in that space. If the space can be well defined, Go was solved like this, and everybody thought it's impossible to do. But yeah, because everybody was doing the library of Babel kind of calculation. Yeah. Oh, if I just take so many words, so many characters, there's so much, so you have to just search through all of it linearly. But somebody's like, no. What if we were to do reward-based learning, and you make it much more efficient, and suddenly you have answers, right? I think you can still do that for the tasks that we are doing today with transformers, language compression, creating abstractions from text that exist. But it'll forever be a auto-regressive next token predictor, right? It'll be a compression model for all of the text that's ever been written that you have fed to it. Can it really get better at something else? Well, fine-tuning is showing us that it learns certain relationships and certain concepts a little better once you do this. And you can also... There's this whole chain of thought, step-by-step reasoning, reflection-based. In fact, just yesterday there was a new reflection model that came out where the only trick is it takes a Llama 3.170 billion model and fine-tunes it with this very specific idea, which was a year ago it was published, and which is that you make the model be a self-critic, right? So you make it first reflect, okay, how am I going to do this task? Then it produces some output. Then it feeds back that output to itself and says, now check your own work, right? Does this seem good to you and whatever? And when it finally reaches that conclusion that, okay, this seems fairly robust to me now, the LLM reaches that conclusion, it then outputs. This new model done by some sort of it's not a fancy lab, no whatever, OpenAI or Meta or whatever, but just some 2-3 people randomly fine-tuned, and they are now beating on the leaderboard, including Llama 3.1 and many other models, right? Because they just added this idea of using language as a way to verify what they can within the realm of what is possible with the LLM. Now, this imitation may go very far. I'm not trying to say that it's not. And by the way, this also just to underscore, phenomenal tasks and achievements by the human race and by these individuals. And I do not want to take away from any of this.
Of course.
Right? What worries me and bothers me, why I want to have this discussion, is that till we all collectively sort of come to some common points of understanding and start talking about this technology not as gods being created and not with that kind of hyperbole, are we going to be able to think about how to make this a useful part of society? A lot of the safety debate, treat this like nuclear weapons, there are literally AI safety people who are like, you should drop bombs on anybody who has a data center with more power than this. And are you hearing yourself, right? At what point is this the idea? Is there reasonable safety concerns? I think yes. I mean, I can tell you the more mundane vectors are not as sexy and they don't require nuclear bombs, but spam calling, right? These are the kind of things that we have to actually worry about releasing this technology into the wild. And for some reasons and for some flaws and concerns, we may even consider doing a lot of what is being asked, which is license, slow down or whatever, but not for the reasons that I was hearing initially when this thing came in, which is that, okay, from GPT-2 to GPT-3 and then 4 has been so much of a gap. therefore just 2 more jumps and we are in like territory where these computers can.
Yeah, today it's a 10th grade student.
Yeah.
So in a few years it will be a PhD student.
In a PhD student, and then it will have its own goals and its own sort of wills and desires that are unknown to us, like, and it says that it often gives this example of comparing human intelligence to, say, some species, right, like which we find very cute, or like a worm or something, right?
Correct.
And says
Sam Harris example that it will think about us like we think about birds.
Correct. And there's again a lot that I disagree with there, right? First of all, we don't understand birds, right? In the history of everything we've written, we've never spoken about the birds or what they're going through or their lives or the great traumas in their sort of thing, right? Like, what is the invention of the aeroplane been for the birds? Like, we've not even documented this. So to say that we will think of them as we think of birds is essentially to say, unless you mean indifference, which I can agree with.
That is what it is actually. But I mean, there is a safety concern embedded in the claim that it is indifferent, because they're saying something like if AI or AGI, which I think we'll come to, and I want to talk about ethics and all that also, but is so incredibly intelligent simply as a consequence of the sort of tech that we've created, it will just come to conclude that our intelligence, in contrast, that delta, is akin to the delta that we have with birds. And the conclusion that it will draw is, I'm going to do my own thing. Now, that begs the question, what is its own thing? What is the intention? I mean, we're driven by the need to copulate, power dynamics, we have social relationships, so on and so forth. So we have some driving intentions, but I don't seem to be able to get anything out of a GPT that I don't initiate with a prompt. So okay, that's one way to like ask that question. What is the intention behind? Do they have intention? Does it have intention? But that's the case. Like if trained on enough data or architected in such a way that it does end up with the ability to have intention, it will pursue that goal, whatever that goal is. And I mean, I'm not even arguing for a paperclip maximizer. I'm not saying that it's just going to maximize the intention we feed into it. I think the alarmist case on this is that it will have some independent intention that has nothing to do with human beings and will pursue that end without consideration to what it does to the human species in the process.
So if this is again where the word intelligence really muddies the water on this, right? If I were to call this super compression, which is in some way what it is, right? It is the reduction of all known knowledge to at least some abstraction or concept that does not make sense to the way you and I work or how our brains work. Like, gravity or the effect of things falling, the concept of things falling was once summarized or abstracted away best as thing fall down.
Yeah.
What goes up must come down. That was the abstraction and the learning we've taken over millions of examples of watching balls fall, watching apples fall, whatever. It took a Newton or whatever, and then at some point Kepler or someone to like force perspective change to say, no. Large bodies attract.
So what's happening there exactly? I mean, back to the Tower of Babel also.
Yeah.
The Library of Babel. It's a similar case, right? So something about reading that, I mean, a learning model could even spot in this library which are potentially great theories. Let's say the next big leap in physics. These are the potentially great theories, but your claim is unable to definitively say, here is the paper that 100% makes sense, is novel and new, and will change something about how we view physics in the world. What is happening in a human brain that's not happening? What is that? I mean, it's a little bit ineffable, but I'm trying to like...
It's effable in a little bit, in a way that, look, if you can hold multiple ideas in your head, right? Retrieve the right one, choose the right one, apply it to the context at hand, see if some idea makes sense, doesn't make sense, etc. Further come up with a thought on how you would sort of test it, etc., whatever, and keep improving this sort of Bayesian probability of whether this idea holds true or not, or has value or not, at least now we're talking about something, say, scientific, like, like gravity or discovery of whatever, right? So somebody also described maths, right? The act of becoming a great mathematician is essentially you go over these concepts over and over again till mathematics becomes intuitive. And then in your brain, there is a space of play, right? Like somewhere these concepts and these things start making some sort of very intuitive sense to you, around which then you can play and explore the edges of that knowledge, right? Of what will happen. A mathematician is not simply trying, let's say I'm trying to discover E is equal to MC square, right? There is some intuition from where that comes, that this energy that this thing has will be related to mass, has something to do with the speed of light, this constant that I've discovered, right? So you're building idea upon idea and going down that path. You are not simply saying, okay, let me try different variables and see, and E is equal to this, E is equal to that.
You're not brute forcing an output.
You're not brute forcing around. That's number one, right? That's the first sort of distinction that I want to make.
Yeah.
That given an intention or a goal, right? There is a planning, there is a reasoning, which is why these terms keep coming up in AGI, right? There is some sort of planning, reasoning thing moving towards an objective. And the efficiency of what you apply at that stage, right? Is important. Now, efficiency defeated in two ways. One is you make the hardware or whatever is the underlying energy cost so cheap that brute forcing becomes viable and you're not really caring about whether you're brute forcing or not. That's one. The other is some architectural strategy where I try to then choose something more
efficient,
right? Like I'm choosing the right thing in the right direction, the first guess. And the other thing is generalizing, right? Which is where I think where humans, flawed or not, we are very good at generalizing. One of the, and again, it's very hard to compare these biological systems to the silicon systems, but often they'll talk about how compared to, say, language, to learn a language, a human child would need to hear a lot less words than an LLM would need to learn to be fluent at the same language, right? Similarly, when it comes to things like understanding basic physics, right? Like if I toss a ball, where is it going to land, right? Learning that simulation simply, nobody's taught you gravity, nobody's taught you projectile motion, nobody's taught you that equations, whatever. But if I throw a ball, you will grab out and reach. And this is like kids do this, right? It was not taught to them. They don't even have those many examples.
But I've seen like sample simulations of, even I remember seeing a Boston Dynamics video on this, where they have made the dog and they have provided it with an objective. The objective is to walk, but not told it how to walk to get from point A to point B. And over a couple thousand repetitions, it figures out that the most efficient way to walk for me to get from here to there, which is the goal that my coder has programmed into me, is for me to use front left leg, right back leg, and walk.
Yeah.
And so walking is the natural output. So I'm trying to figure out, is that an idea? Is that novel? Has it arrived at?
No, so let's put it this way. If you could, there are 2-3 things happening here, right? Like one is where instead of me trying to programmatically tell, so robot arms, for example, have existed where people have taken, what does an arm have? It has 6 degrees of freedom. So, theoretically, I know that with 6 motors, I should be able to, move around in 3D space. Right?
Yeah.
And then, so I build certain configurations of this 6 degrees of freedom. Now, how do I reach each space? Whatever. One is you do the math, you know where you put the motor, you know where the distance is. So given an XYZ coordinate that I have to reach to, right? I can do the math, come up with these very specific equations. I have put the intelligence of that equation there, right? What you're talking about is that, okay, even if you simulate walking in these environments and you get to a walker, right? The saving of the state and then building on that idea, right? Or actually when I implement it in the dog, right? Like what am I going to do? I'm probably going to do something like this, or like take full self-driving cars. I think this is probably the better example, right? Like full self-driving cars, essentially what you're doing is instead of trying to tell the car, if you see this, go left, if you see this, go right, because that we realize is an impossible task. We're simply saying that, see all of these images, this is the right move in this space, right? Given enough of those examples, we are hoping that now when it encounters some new scenario, it will do the right thing. And then on this, while I don't understand this again, I don't have a full detailed understanding of how these people are doing it. These are like very strictly protected IPs. but how do you protect, like in a scenario where something is going wrong, you will have some safety system which stops in and like stops it. Now, with all of this, as of today, again, caveat, and this is now, self-driving cars have been tried for a very long time.
Correct, yeah.
More than a decade and a half. Like I think the first was in the 90s or whatever, right? So we're looking at 30, 40 years of development. We are still at a place where these cars do cause accidents. Now you can argue that they're still safer than humans in the number of accidents that they cause, which I am honestly in favor of, right? Like if they are lesser accident causing than humans, then by all means we should think about moving, right? I'm pragmatic about this. But to call them intelligent is the bone of my contention. They're a very good compression of things they've learned from existing examples. But let's suppose there is a volcano eruption which causes the sky to change color, as it did in 1880 or 1890. No, 18 or 17. This is when who's the artist?
I know exactly
Munch, Edward Munch. Yeah. So Munch painted the scream, and he had that orange background, if you remember, that very sort of iconic. Apparently was because a volcanic eruption had made the sky orange for a few years. Now, we don't even know if these self-driving cars, if the sky turns orange tomorrow, will be able to drive the same way with consistency in all the same situations. Because we don't know if in the sample set of one of these, the sky was always blue and it indexes on that in some way. Right? I can tell you a human driver would be able to deal with that situation.
Okay, so one final question, and then we head into a small break.
Yeah.
I think we're using some words as we're talking, right? Words like consciousness, intelligence, all of that. I want to try and figure out what is not intelligent. Okay, so for example, humans are intelligent. Are we on the same page on this?
Yeah, most of them.
Just is a horse intelligent?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is a tree intelligent?
Interesting. Yeah, I would like to. Yeah, that's a good one. I actually haven't. I've always thought about animate and inanimate, but a tree is like in that gray zone where I haven't really bothered to do this. But within its ability to problem solve, I have found that a lot of trees do have sort of intelligent responses to stimuli that I know of species. But once again, I don't know if that sort of translates all the way across to like from like algae to fungi to like, like what I'm saying, right? Like I know of specific examples of trees being intelligent. For example, when they act in this coordinated behavior to ward off pests or do a bunch of stuff, which frankly is very sort of intelligent responses to stimuli. But yeah, I don't know how to generalize.
Like as a kid, I remember that there's the touch me not, Mimosa pudica, which if you touch will close its leaves. And we say that's an intelligent response. Yeah. And I mean, maybe it's also linguistics. Like we just don't have the words for all of this.
Correct.
So the first correlation I'm trying to draw is everything that is alive intelligent? That's the sort of the broad question. And maybe what I'm hearing your answer sounds like is, it depends. They're all intelligent on a gradient.
Yeah.
So human is more intelligent than a horse.
Yeah.
But it is not like a tree is not intelligent. It is just not intelligent like a horse is intelligent. But it certainly is in this gradient of intelligence.
In the gradient of intelligence, right? I've seen things, and the humility of not being able to understand what these things and these systems do, especially in relationship to each other, right? Like we may, literally the thing here would be missing the forest for the trees, right? Especially on those fronts, I think we are still at the very sort of nascent journey of understanding these systems and how they work together very well. So therefore, to even sort of make that, because the other thing about intelligence, and it's another thing we discussed in our pre-work and it's not come up, so maybe we pause and we come back to this, is the idea of the intelligence of the crowd, right? Like the wisdom of the crowd.
Correct.
Like humans acting as autonomous agents produce statistical outcomes that are intelligent. As a system, we're intelligent.
That seems to be true actually of trees also.
Exactly. Right? That's what I'm getting at. Like there are these, it depends on where you draw the boundary, right? Like is a single cell of a human being intelligent? No, but somehow the collection is.
Okay.
Right?
Great.
Like these are the ideas that I'm grappling with myself, and I have no good answer.
The tough question I'm trying to ask is Claude, in its current conception, more intelligent than a horse?
Oh, wow. No. This I think I have a very solid model for what okay, let's even start by asking where is Claude? What is Claude? Right?
Yes,
like how do you identify
yes.
Claude? Like a horse, you see, you know where the horse starts, you know where the horse ends, right? You know, you can point to something, this is horse, that is not horse.
Yeah.
Claude is running somewhere on some system somewhere, and we have access to an interface to Claude. Let's say they were kind enough, Anthropic came and said, Deepak, here is entirely all of the code, data, everything that makes up Claude. Here, go run it on your system. And you have the weights, and you have the code that they run, and you run it on your system, which is air-gapped from the internet. Now this machine, this box is Claude, right? Now, is this box more intelligent than a horse? Right? It's not, right? Like you see where I'm going with this, right? It's not because even if you were to give it certain stimuli and ask it for answers or responses, that air gap machine, for a second, that air gapping is very important, because then it is text in, text out. The text in and the text out are very dependent on some human or some other thing prompting, it to do it. And whatever it says, the way it acts and what it does is going to be text out. Now, how does this system self-improve? How does it actually learn in this state?
But that can be said of all living organisms, right? Without an input, they do not self-improve.
No. Okay. Let's assume that let's make this example a little better, right? Let's go back to that self-driving car. Now, instead of it being a box, this box is connected
four wheels on it. Yeah.
Yeah, you've put 4 wheels on it. You put a camera. You've put whatever. Now this box is let loose and the horse is let loose, right? Do you see? I would still say that the horse is more intelligent, right? Because the horse, out of some agency or autonomy of itself, would go about eating grass, looking for other horses, start running, if it finds one of those shrubs that are, horses are known to get high on certain kinds of plants, right? So if it finds one of those plants, eats it, gets high, it'll go back and search for more of those plants.
So, I mean, I'm claiming that it's operating on programming. It is a programmed biological organism. It has inputs which come in, which is that, whatever, like I can feel the ground beneath my feet, I can drink the water, those are all inputs. I see an animal, I have to run away, predator, grass, eat it, green. And the reason a horse knows to eat green grass without having been taught by another horse is because of some inherent programming. It is
Correct.
biological, but it is effectively a machine.
See, there is that reduction to, there's something that you lose, some qualia that you lose when you reduce everything down to
I'm saying that theoretically I may be willing to concede for a human being, but are you saying that a horse has qualia?
Yeah, we don't know what it's like to be a horse, but the idea.
Okay, then let me pivot the question.
Yeah.
You're saying it surely is like something to be a horse.
Yeah.
But it's not like anything to be Claude in a box.
Yeah. I personally think that being biological has a lot to do with being conscious.
The substrate matters.
Right? Like it seems incredibly hard to me that an idea of consciousness self-emerges in silicon, because my mental model of what consciousness is that as cells came together and started becoming these sort of more complex being, the idea of consciousness, right, that emerged is somewhere to help us sort of navigate this world by telling consistent self story, right? Like that's what's really happening. You are giving meaning to the inputs that you see, learning abstractions from them, saving those abstractions, usually saving them alongside an emotional response, right? Which is why anxiety, for example, right? You were saying that brainstem. So when we were simply reptilian creatures, right? And we had sort of the reptilian part of our brain, the amygdala, right? Which does the basics, takes care of breathing, heart rate, flight or fight responses. even when the cortex developed, right, like the frontal cortex developed, for certain kind of responses to learn that something is really bad and we should avoid it, it hijacked the functioning of the amygdala, right? So if you can call that layer our intelligence, if at all, on that gradient of intelligence, what you're calling, even that at some level is complete only by hijacking the reward system of the basic human sort of responses, where we've learned to be anxious or fearful of stuff like exams. Right?
Got it. So I'll be more reductionist then. A tree doesn't have an amygdala.
Yeah.
Is Claude in a box more intelligent than a tree? I'm not sure we're using the right words anymore.
Yeah, we're not using the right words. That's what I'm trying to say. I get it. So like, can Claude process more information more usefully than trees can? For some problems, yes. But like, we already know that there are certain kind of, I think it was algae, who are better at solving the traveling salesman problem than a computer is, right? So you know this one, right? Like they have these different, I think it was a mold, it was not even an algae, my bad. You have this sort of place, you set up a physical traveling salesman problem such that the algae has to form a shortest route between them. And it was proven that the algae just sort of naturally finds the shortest route somehow. Biologically, whatever is happening, they're moving towards each other and bridging.
Okay. Surely a tree does not have free will, right? Like a tree is if something is a stochastic parrot, a tree is a parrot. As in, it's just, it is pre-coded, it responds to external stimuli. If the sun is in some direction, it grows there, not because it wants to. It does not even know what it means to want something. It doesn't have a brain.
We don't know that. Like, I mean, I am willing to concede that it's very hard to see evidence of that. But do we sincerely know that the living being, in fact, let me make a counterclaim. I strongly know what Claude is, right? Because I mean, I can reproduce Claude, right? And I can reproduce Claude by running the code, doing the math, whatever. And I know. So I may make this claim more strongly, not because I am willing to say that trees are dumb, right? It's actually that is what is giving me trouble. That I can't, but I am fairly confident about what the quote unquote intelligence of a Claude is. It's not the tree which is giving me trouble in this example. I mean, so it's not Claude, it's not AI is giving me trouble in this example. It is the tree, right? I do not understand these systems. I do not understand, especially them when you say, once again, forest for the tree, right? I do not even understand how these things work together. This is what I was talking about in that book, Elephant in the Brain, right? Yeah. This is the opening thing talks about why is a redwood tree tall? Redwood tree is tall because we are taught evolution in a way that says evolution is, of course, you're competing with species. So the tallest tree gets the most sunlight, will get the most resources. But actually being tall is very hard because you have to take water from the ground all the way to the top, which is capillary action. And going 80 meters on capillary action is very hard. After that, like you reach a point where the pressure there is so low that you can't actually suck water out from even capillary action. So why grow that tall? And you'll say, okay, no, like we were discussing this and you suggested that no, maybe at some point there were other trees which were competing against.
Correct.
But no, it's intra-species competition, right? And the point that a lot of people make is that, okay, well, humans are intelligent because being in intelligent and coordinated responses allowed us to defeat animals and jungles and whatever. But then at some point we should just sat down. What is all this farming and stuff that we're doing, right? We just chilled and we knew how to defeat most things, etc. But we started building civilization, and then we have ambitions and we want to go to space and we want to build colonies on Mars. And this is not coming anymore from trying to be better than any other species on planet Earth, is it? It is
just each other.
Just each other. It's just intra-species competition. Like you want to get smarter and better and all of this, honestly, for more status and power and sex and all of those things, right?
Which are still the base motivations of most reproducing species.
Exactly. And that, to me, the intelligence that we've had at some level, and so now intelligence using the word in meat systems, right? Meat-based intelligence as opposed to silicon-based intelligence. All meat-based intelligence to me has come down and has linked to these objectives somehow.
Okay. Now, I'm.
Yeah,
First of all, yeah, okay. So we'll take a quick break.
Yeah.
We'll get something to drink, and then we'll come back. When we're back, I think we'll focus heavily on ethics. I think that's a fun place to go.
Ethics, I think agency, right? Like somewhere
Agency.
I want to underline that I know that there is you're a free will skeptic, right? So therefore
Yes,
you don't say
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's a fun one. And of course, the Age of M.
Age of M. Yeah, that's a good one.
Cool. Okay. Hi, Tanuj. Welcome back.
All right, let's get back to it.
Yeah. The claim that you're making, if I'm trying to represent it well, is that everything that's alive is intelligent, and intelligent in some novel way, in a gradient of intelligence. Claude in a box is not alive, and something about that makes it just not, or it is intelligent like, so it emulates intelligence, but it is not a living being. And I think this is the first time this has happened in human history. For the first time, we have something that seems human-like intelligence, but it's not even alive. That's the claim that you sort of have.
Correct.
And maybe then all we're missing is a word for this. So you have some word that means intelligence, and then there's a parallel way to think, quote unquote, or to process, quote unquote, silicon-based processing that has reached human-like intelligence figures. And there's some word for this. It seems intelligent-like, something like that, right?
Sure.
Okay. So is that fair enough? Like this, I mean, can we say that this is a type of being that is not a biological being? It doesn't fit the rules of biology or the intelligence rules that we've applied to biological organisms, but is intelligent-like. It is some pseudo being.
Yeah. So I would agree with the idea that we need a new category for these systems. Precisely because the things that we commingle with intelligence are lacking. One of them that it really gets my goat is agency, because the word that a lot of people use is AI agents, but what they in fact lack is agency, right? Like you don't have AI system, the Claude in the box with wheels, with pincers and all of that is still not going around goal setting for itself and then goal seeking and then goal updation, right? Like you have to give them the goals.
You can program this in, right? You can program the goal into the...
Yes, you can. But can you program it to say, now update your goal? Right? Because if you think about it, a human is not... Like, even when you're born, there is some instinct or some desire to do things that you have inherently, or like, that makes you feel good, right? Like social validation probably makes you feel good. Programmed at some level through genetics or whatever, which we've not managed to give to these systems, and we've not managed to give to these systems in all its glory that comes with when you have a goal. That if you singularly, like paperclip maximizer, right? This is the paperclip maximizer example is the thing that we worry about, right? Like with humans, there is some regulation of all our excesses, right? Or even with animals, right? Like a dog that gets sort of say hit or by something, or sees a stick and like that stick has been used to hurt it, next time it sees anybody with any stick, it is going to react in a certain way.
Yeah.
These things are not what these models are yet doing.
I'm wondering if we're thinking about this too much from a human lens. So I will concede, let's say for example, that a generative pre-programmed transformer-based thing that's sitting in a box is not like a human.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
A dog is not like a human, and a cow is not like a human. So
alive versus not. I actually like I say, I want to agree with the idea that what we need to separate out is that it mimics a certain aspect of an alive being that so far was restricted to alive beings. Now, and therefore now we have to circle and isolate that exact ability and bring it out. Okay, right?
Metaphysical, like just how do you know that I am alive versus that I am mimicking a human being who's alive?
Right. So there is a certain vitality, continuity, cohesion to talking to Deepak that continues to be talking to Deepak, right? It is not I can have a theory of mind about you, right? Like this is what Deepak is, who's what he does or whatever. And when you present yourself next time, you are more or less coherent, right? And it continues. I may update that. I may be surprised. I may be wrong about some things, or some things are unknown, but more or less this is coherent. In fact, if you were to come tomorrow and present completely differently, like if let's say you're a Deepak robot right now, and then the operator of the Deepak robot changed, and then I was listening to that new operator's words, I would still recognize the difference. Right?
Well, there's a function of memory, no? If I have enough memory, if I'm able to hold short-term, long-term memory well, I can pay attention to the right things. Or the other way to think about it is, I'm sure you think that severely autistic people are alive and that they are conscious, and but they may struggle to do these things that you've described.
So I'll give you if I'm not trying to, I want to engage with this very, very willfully, but I'm sort of jumping ahead a little bit and telling you about the opposite, right? Humans are actually on Reddit complaining that their AI girlfriends don't sound the same after Character AI does a system-wide upgrade.
Sounds like real girlfriends.
I'm going to refrain from commenting on that, but like the idea that sort of the experience of talking to somebody who is what I conflate as alive and intelligent, like let's call that meat intelligence category for now. And actually maybe that's the term we're looking for, meat intelligence, silicon intelligence, right?
I love it, yeah.
So meat intelligence so far, what I have seen, and versus silicon intelligence, what I've seen so far, there is a coherence, there is a self-updating, there is these things that happen. You're absolutely right that if you have memory, if you have certain other things, it'll learn, right? If you remember, there are these like RPG games, in fact, came up with some crude estimation of this, where you had personality traits or characteristics, right? So if you're aggressive, then you'll aggressive, right? Like, or if you're whatever, and if you have your maga is very high, then you'll do magic skills, all of that, right? So some version of that is what I'm trying to allude to.
Is that not just, one question would be, if I change the amount of compute or the type of chip that I'm using, like company versus company, would that not result in a slightly different processing and hence different output? So those two clouds those two AIs in a box would be different AIs in a box.
Yes, they would be, and in fact, we have people already using this. This is what they're calling agents, right? Like I'm like, if I change the system prompt to a Claude, to the same base code, I have now added a little more input. Now this one acts like a fact generator, and this one acts like a fact checker. This one acts like a whatever, and this one acts like this.
Then these two clouds in a box, are they independent personalities?
Well, look, the cop-out way of answering this for me is, personality is something I ascribe to a human, but let me engage. They are different personalities in the sense that they are two different AI systems or whatever machines that meet in silicon intelligence that are functioning slightly differently. Yes.
I'm sort of trying to get to the ethics of this, right? So we're agreeing that it is something else, not intelligence. So we're calling it silicon intelligence. It's a different class of intelligence. And they have personalities, but it's not like meat personalities. They're silicon personalities, and they can have unique personalities. At this point, why do we not call them beings? As in, it is almost the same as a dog or a cow. It's a being that's not based on the same substrate. But it's as distinct as a tree is from a hawk.
Yes, but do you give, for example, your cars that same qualia and that same sort of right? Like you have a car, like I have an electric car. For the large part, what runs the car is no longer the battery and the motor. It is all the stuff inside it, right? Especially when you think about ADAS level 2, right? That is literally intelligence.
That's a great question. And I think that what I intuitively feel like responding is something like, it's very narrow in its intelligence, which is where the term comes from, right? It just drives a car and nothing else. Versus these generative technologies, which are quite wide in their ability. So it can draw a painting, it can write you a poem, forget human beings, forget that interaction with human, as an independent collection of beings, right? Yeah. Which is sort of the premise of the age of M, which we'll explain shortly.
Yeah.
These two clouds in a box or AIs in a box will talk to each other. because they're both unique personalities, and one could give an input to the other could give an input to the other. And I mean, at this point, they are beings that we go into the domain of, do they have rights? Do they have, I don't know, everything we'd worry about with humans and with trees, with dogs and with trees. Why not with?
I think personally, I'd like to answer this with something very simple. If you look at the ethics of what we have today, I emphasize today because like you go a few 100 years back and then sort of owning other humans as slaves, as labor that you don't have to give anything, give any particular rights to, or only certain kind of rights was understood. There was also what was it called? 4/5 rule or 2/3 rule. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
They're
not full humans, but they are a fractional human.
Yeah. What was that? 2/3 rule was it?
I don't remember the exact fraction, but I know exactly.
It was 2/3 rule or 4/5 rule or something like that, and which is also very amusing, right? Like how we come up with justification for an idea.
Yeah. Are they 2/3? Is an AI in a box 2/3 human? Yeah.
Is it 2/3 human? Right? Like that's what I'm trying to get at, right? Like even with human beings, for a long while we had this thing. See, one thing I'm eager to get to and talk about, starting to hint at with the group of trees, etc., is two things, right? One is the idea of agency, and the other is the idea of culture or groupthink, right? These are two important concepts that I want to now bring into the conversation. One, I am very okay with assigning rights to things with agency, true agency. They are goal setting, goal updating, goal setting, goal seeking, goal updating kind of beings. If we can prove this for
which is why I asked, do you think I'm alive and I'm free and all that? Because if they mimic it, it is the same as me mimicking it. I mean, because I'd like to claim that I have no evidence that you are actually conscious, alive, real, all of that. I just have evidence that you mimic those features about yourself.
Cool. Right? Like in epistemologically, 100% certainty that you and I are alive is never there, and it continues to not be there, right? And it is, I think, therefore I am. So
so you are alive. But how do you know I think?
I don't know, right? So but the idea of ethics or the idea of assigning rights comes from the fact that even in the uncertainty of not knowing that Deepak is truly alive, given the chance that denying Deepak rights will cause harm, I'm trying to give everybody rights, everybody that comes close enough to looking like that. And this is where the edge cases for us humans on this debate still continue to remain stuff like fetuses, right? At what point in the pregnancy do we say they're alive?
Yeah, fair premise,
Right? So the idea of assigning rights or ethics doesn't necessarily even need for us to have a good enough definition and like be very precise about it, because we know that even whatever we do, there is something right outside the boundary that will make us ask what if. So to me, the definition is agency, which so far I have not seen true agency in these systems. I do not see them being self-aware in a way. And my favorite example is the strawberry example, not because so for listeners, the strawberry example is you go ask something like a ChatGPT, how many R's are there in the letter strawberry? And it continues to fail at this answer. Nowadays, I think through enough examples, it's starting to say 3, but you just have to ask a very simple question, are you sure? Or I think you're wrong. And it becomes like this overeager child to agree with you, right? So it'll say, yeah, there are 2. And then if once it says 2, you ask it again, it'll say, oh no, there are 3. I was right the first time.
Yeah.
Then you ask, but why were you incorrect the second time? And I actually have that answer on my phone, but at some point we can read it to the effect of, I should not have doubted myself. I should have trusted my answer, right? And it says all these things, whereas you and I actually know this, that one of the reasons why it is unable to count strawberry very easily is because it is working on tokens, not characters. And there's a thing where roughly sort of 4 characters is a token. So like 3/4 of a word typically is like the token can be anything random, right? It could be things that appear most frequently. They stochastically determined a set of sort of things that they've decided are tokens. And actually we can look up how the tokenizer tokenizes strawberry, but whatever, there'll probably be something like straw or str and then o, and So it's not actually counting the letters, even in its own programming. And we know that this is the reason why it gets confused. But the self-awareness for this to even think and know that this is why it said this is not there. So one is agency. Second is self-awareness, right? At some level, at least, you have this mirror test for children, etc., right? People have tried to emulate this mirror test, right, by asking Claude or these things about what do you know you are, etc. And there have been some, again, text, but nothing convincing that shows that they know exactly what they are, how they function, how they're producing output, etc. A lot of it is them just extrapolating on what is called a system prompt, which is you are Claude, you are a helpful assistant, you will do this, you will answer questions in such a way. The last thing I want to talk about is culture, right? Because if you look at the slavery example, the 2/3 or whatever, like think about the absurdity of that idea that a human is somehow 2/3 human. And therefore let us give them rights that way, is absurd, is clearly enough absurd for us today. But at some point of time, at least some set of people who bought that into power, they may not be a majority, but the people who are in power, who bought that rule into power, could convince themselves enough into thinking that. That happens via culture. That is a strong claim that I want to make. So tomorrow, whether you want to give some rights to these beings or not, comes down to culture, comes down to whether we all have to agree or not agree on that. Now, I want to make a further claim on this. I want to say that whether we give these beings rights or not rights, or the ethics of turning them off, letting them do their thing, doing whatever, will be determined by which humans benefit and which humans don't. It will not have anything to do with the qualia, with the what premise of those things themselves, right? Can we convince each other?
Do you really think that? Do you think that because when it comes to rights of animals, for a long time that was the case, that we used to presuppose that we will worry about the rights of animals to that degree that it affects us as human beings. But of late, once we solved sort of inequalities, at least on the legal front across the human species, we have moved to other species. So now the vegan movement is big. We think about speciesism as a real thing. We try to guarantee the rights of like a rabbit from experimentation, independent of what the outcome is going to be. We just take a moral stance saying if it is a being, then it is like me in some way. It's on the same gradient that I'm on. And so, we're going to argue this and sort of bring into law things that guarantee those rights, irrespective of who is in power, who it benefits, who it does not benefit. We're making a moral claim about this case.
And those are often overridden when it comes to the conveniences and wants of humans, right? So I agree that people are trying to make that claim. And I agree that the social milieu that we currently have, this becomes stronger. One of the big ideas for this is climate change, because biodiversity often is in itself not a goal for humans, but we've very cleverly made it a indicator of large scale human change inflicted upon natural systems, and therefore biodiversity as in and of itself is now seen as a way for us to as a symbol or as a measure or a metric of how much are we inflicting unnatural change on biosystems.
Right.
Veganism itself has contradictions, of course, because farming involves the killing of animals, right? Like the large scale farming, like if you want protein, if you're a vegetarian, you will probably take soybean. Soybean is large scale mechanized farming that is going to be killing a bunch of squirrels and whatever as these tractors move through the farms. So a little bit of, even we know this about, say, tigers, right? Save the tiger is a great movement. Save the pig isn't, or save the chicken is not. There is a certain kind of, again, a human lens of looking at animal species, and the tiger is majestic and pure, and like, the sight of a dead tiger is a lot more unnerving than the sight of a dead chicken.
Of course. But right. I'm saying that now more utilitarian philosophers are saying that we need to do math it is a rational question. So if I have to grow plants to feed chicken and then eat the chicken, I'd rather eat the plants because there is an additional step in the way. Now you could ask questions like what feels more pain, 10,000 crickets or one chicken or two chickens or whatever. And I mean, while hard to answer, there's still a concerted effort to come to an answer that has nothing to do with human beings. Like we're not saying that the pre-conclusion is that I need to eat a chicken. So how do I justify this? We're doing at least that movement has started. More and more people are sort of, I think in a 200 year or 300 year horizon, enough tech will catch up that people will choose less options that make animals suffer less, so on and so forth. It seems like a natural progression because we've already been undergoing it. Why not to an AI?
So, two separate questions, right? Like I think the idea of say growing. So as humans, we will always face what seems like impossible trade-offs, right? We will always have the choice between, do I want the very immediate, very real consequence of knowing that because of me an animal has died? Or would I rather have the fig leaf version of I'm eating plant?
I get what you're saying.
I'm like, let's take once again, like interesting things are stuff like say Jains, right? Jains have this thing that they will not eat potatoes and onions because they come from under the ground. Under the ground, there are some microorganisms that we will end up eating. We don't want to kill microorganisms also. Right. This is the advanced form of veganism, if I may say so. Right. And then Jains will do some stuff like, drink dairy products, right? Like that. You're actually hurting an animal, right? You're doing some...
But not killing it.
Not killing it, right? But there's some immense trauma that you're doing to that animal, right? And taking away its children and doing a bunch of things. Frankly, because the killing is recognized as violent from our point of view. Which tiger atones getting up and, finding something to eat? Which cat, like you may have a cat and the cat loves you and you love the cat and the cat shows some friendliness. But it'll still go and kill a bat or kill a pigeon and bring it and present it to you as a gift. And it'll do it out of sheer love, right? So I'm making the claim that even the veganism idea is because we like to present ourselves as generally pro-social. And killing and being violent is not part of that philosophy. And we would like to not do it because we've associated killing and violence with pain. And when you do it in other species also, you can see the similarity. And so you're like, how is this not?
Will that extend to an AI?
Culturally, if we manage to do more robots, more, start talking about them as intelligent beings, start talking about them as, stuff that is embodied and, so to me, the answer is the more embodied AI we see. This goes back to an earlier point in our conversation where we were talking about how if you were to your iRobot example, right? Like Sunny versus Vicky.
Yeah.
Right? I'm trying to tell you that it is going to be determined by how we present and talk about these technologies. The more we put them into cute looking, kawaii robots and make them in the physical world come and talk in our ear and do all of that, give them a consistent voice or a consistent personality, have them retain memories so they talk to us and present to us like humans or whatever, where at a point, I'm not able to distinguish whether this is, the Turing test example, where I'm not able to distinguish as an actual friend in my ear calling me, or is this, being generated from a machine. The closer we look to are in that world, the more humans may believe that these are beings whom we need to say. I don't think fundamentally that they ever get to being status, right? Unless we are able to do some breakthrough thing and we show that consciousness is actually this particular set of neural architecture, and it just emerges. And I don't know how far or close we are to that. I would say very far because we've not even found it in ourselves. If we found it in ourselves, maybe emulating it comes very easy.
But you're still comfortable making the claim that an AI is not as conscious as we are?
Fundamentally, I cannot see that because look, the structures of all AI that I know begin with somebody or some input, right, that has been defined for it. And that input itself is human interpreted, right? So, the Conway game of life, right? Simple rules, let it run, and infinite complexity emerges. Like that's the argument of the game of life, that hey, if you think life is so complex that we can't figure it out, actually no, here are simple rules from which you can generate this infinite complexity. If anything, this AI systems that we know are showing us that you can have a very simple, like the whole code base for something like a Claude or whatever is probably going to be only a few hundred lines of code. Like the actual training of the transformers is a few hundred lines of code, right? Those few hundred lines of code, when combined with all this data, run on it over and over and over and over again, and like run over all of that data, leads to some weight or some model that when given an input produces a certain kind of output. We know exactly what this thing is. Nowhere am I seeing the emergence of consciousness, of agency, of self-awareness.
So that's exactly the case I'm making, that there are some set of initial conditions that have gone into the universe, every single atom that exists, you and me, our creation. Now, as human beings, we simply do not have the ability to comprehend those initial conditions. It's too large and too complicated. But it's finite. If we knew those initial set of conditions, then, I mean, either everything is random, in which case we are not freely choosing, or it is determined, in which case we're not freely choosing. But we are slightly more complex versions, meat-based, of Claude in a box that is silicon-based and a lot simpler. So broadly, that is, I mean, the case I'm trying to make is that if we are computational output engines that are significantly more complicated, then the rights we give, or the value we assign to other computational engines that are intelligent seeming, becomes fairly justified.
So let's also then agree on what rights would you give them, right? Let me flip this. That's
a great question.
Let me try to go with this premise, because fundamentally it's very hard for me to get over this block of, but we're talking about
a computer.
Numbers. Yeah, we're talking about numbers,
Yeah.
right? We're talking about a set of numbers certainly arranged, which you are saying, but hey, humans also are a set of numbers, and I feel
set of atoms.
Set of atoms, certain arranged in a certain way, and we're essentially, like, the reduction is that we are all input-output machines, which is a useful abstraction, but the reduction is not something I agree with, right? We are way more than that, and everything that we've come up with when it comes to rights, when it comes to whatever, is a response that when you put not one individual, an individual per se does not need rights. Who's going to enforce that rights? If you were the last person on earth, Deepak, you wouldn't need rights.
As in, I wouldn't need my rights enforced.
What rights?
As in, I would have rights.
You would have rights. You can give yourself any rights you want. Right? Like, you're the only person around.
Yeah, but I get the argument that you're making, right?
If it's two people on an island, you start needing rules, right?
Yeah, this makes complete sense. At least the enforcement of rules only makes sense if there's somebody else that I'm supposed to navigate this with.
Yeah. And right, so, and therefore when you have a lot of us, you have culture, you have society, you have us responding to unfairness. Have you seen that unfairness, how that monkey experiment of unfairness you've seen, where they give the two monkeys, they make them do the exact same task in a cage, both can see each other. When one person does it, they get a grape, which is apparently highly valued for monkeys.
Yeah, I have seen this.
And the other person gets a cucumber, and the monkey goes stark raving mad, right? Like, it throws the cucumber back at the scientist.
Yeah, I don't want your cucumber, I want a grape.
I want a grape, right? That guy got a grape. And same thing with humans. I was talking to you in our pre sort of thing about this. I have an article, maybe we should post this for people to see.
Yeah.
Where people didn't mind an AI taking decisions for them because they thought the AI is fair. But if a human is taking it up, you want to object or whatever, right? So the idea of rights also come from unfairness to systems.
Let's do the most fundamental right, the right to life.
Right to life for an AI system.
Yeah.
Therefore we'll have to first define when does an AI die.
Right? No, but before that, we've agreed that they're not alive, no? So...
So right to life is not... Yeah, I mean, if we agreed they're not alive, is there. So let's talk about...
The right to seize. As in, the right to stop... The right to not stop processing. Something like that. Now, I want to push back against myself, actually, because I'm thinking about this as we're speaking.
Yeah.
I think that the way we logically infer the right to life for human beings is by saying something like, I am born and I am alive.
Yeah.
I am not alive because you plugged in a cable into a wall socket.
Yeah.
And the right to relinquish this is in my own hands.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you have to keep me alive.
Yeah.
So if I cease to find food, or I just sit in a house the entire day and do nothing and I die, then I'm not asking for your intervention.
Yeah.
But if someone were to come at me with a knife or a gun, then I'm saying you have to come in and say that, hey, fundamentally Deepak has the right to be alive.
Yeah.
Right. But in the case of AI in a box, this sort of air-gapped thing that we've concocted, somebody plugged it in. There was an initial hand that turned on the electricity. Someone's paying for the electricity itself that's being generated.
Sure.
So it's a dependent being.
Let's strip away complexities for ourselves, right? Let's make it easier. Let's say solar panel, like part of the system is its own ability to feed itself. Human beings can forage, find whatever, right?
Yeah, awesome.
Let's reduce this.
Yeah.
Let's reduce that complexity. Yes, it is not. It did not spontaneously come to life.
Still the private property argument, which is that somebody owns that.
Somebody owns
solar
the
panel.
silicon or whatever. But
okay, let's say that the person who created it signed a contract,
waving away.
I waved away all rights,
all property rights or whatever. Now this box, you are free. It's like Dobby being given the sock.
Well, it's owned by the state technically, but okay, fair enough. I'm not doing any of this. Let's say Dobby's been given the sock.
Dobby's been given the sock, right? It's alive. What rights do we give this machine, right? Would you agree that before rights, there are certain duties or responsibilities that we as humans would want out of this machine? If this machine so decides that, you know what, I am the smartest being on this planet and I am not causing destruction to this planet, I will sit and compute and keep coming up with the whole library of
Babel,
and from that I only will eliminate the ones that don't make sense and I will further and advance knowledge.
Yeah.
But these guys, they keep getting in the way because they may turn me off.
Yeah.
I should go destroy all of them, right? I know how to hack into the nuclear whatever and launch it and like just boom, end this once and for all. Would you argue that this box should have that obligation? It's an extension of our right to life, right?
Absolutely not, because there's an infringement on the right to life that humans already have. So you cannot in any way, the state already defends a right to life that you and I have.
Sure.
And no object living or non-living with some sort of intent can take that away from me. So
correct. So therefore we know that even if this box exists, whatever the freedoms we have to give it have to end at the same sort of obligations that we end at for another human, right? Impinging or whatever.
Approximately, yeah.
If it is not costing anything, if it is not causing anyone trouble, let it process. Air-gapped system.
Correct.
Completely fine. But now let's say it can interact, like it is embodied in a way that is a robot or whatever.
Yeah.
It can go about taking things, doing things, building things, etc. We would want it once again to embed in society by having certain protections, right? Of like for us, right? Which is like, hey, if you go take something, you have to make sure that thing does not belong to someone.
Correct.
Right? Etc.
But you're still talking about defending rights that humans have. I'm saying that if I were to go and attempt to stab this box.
Correct. That's what I want to first establish that sort of it. If essentially what we're trying to do is embed it into society.
Yeah.
If it has to embed into society, in the ways that it can interact with society, it has to respect the rules of society. Right? Like that's the first premise before we even get to right.
Yeah.
So if, for example, this box does not have arms, legs, but is able to control or influence the power grid.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe because it has so much GPU, if it just turns them all on at full speed, it can suck enough power to take out the thing of a city.
Yeah.
Right? The first thing before we even accord it any status and integration into society where it is not the property of someone, but it is Dobby with the sock and not somebody's house elf. We would want that system first upholds everything that we would expect anything in that position or any human with that power to uphold, right? Like that's the number one thing that you have. Now, this flip question, which is what can humans not do to such a system? And the very first thing I would ask is, what is this, like every human I know is actually going to go about doing certain things. They're probably going to want to have, a place to live, a meaningful work to do, social interaction with other people, etc. What is the mental model of this box that it is trying to do or trying to achieve, right? And that programming has not come from an actor, right? Because let's take this Dobby with a sock example. I program it to be as destructive to as humans as possible. And then I give it a sock and I say, hey, now I am not responsible. It has decided to do its own thing and is going around destroying people. I mean, you will look through that argument very simply and say, boss, we saw that you programmed it to be destructive.
Yeah, but in any case, it violates the rights humans already have. Right? So that's the obvious case.
Okay. In obvious case also, we make it like, you can go about making cities beautiful, right? You could argue that's a thing,
It's like a public property thing. So then there's regulation that determines who decides how to make cities more beautiful. You can't poop on the road. You also can't put a plant on the road. Like we just disagree on that already.
Yeah. So you see where I'm going with this, right? Like, what does it mean to give it rights? If it's not right to life, it's not.
It's whatever it means to give you and me rights. Because we also can't poop or plant a tree on the road.
Which is my point. No, but what rights do we have that this machine, you agree, will not have, right? One is that it's not alive. So, but can somebody come in and sabotage?
Case for the full ambit of human rights, in whatever degree it makes sense. So, I mean, there are some things that the machine will simply be unable to do like a human being.
See, I'll tell you. So this comes from this very good podcast episode that I really, really admire, that I have learned in life. It's been a missing answer all along. It's called Descend into the Particular. So there are certain Malcolm Gladwell revisionist history. It is a 3-part series where basically says that there are some questions that if we try to argue at the general level, we will always disagree. The best way out of this is to descend into the particular. So if we go into a more specific case, we are able to articulate this better. And that's sort of arguing at the right level of abstraction, because he gives this example of this baseball bowler, to bowl really fast. You can actually get a surgery done where you remove something. It's not drugs, but it is performance enhancing, because if you remove one thing, you can actually like bowl really fast and like reach superhuman speeds that nobody can. Should that be legal or illegal? Because it's not drugs, it's not performance enhancing drugs. But on the other hand, if you got a surgery to repair a shoulder, right, like something went wrong and you repaired it, but in the repair of that, they've given you certain drugs for recovery, right? But those drugs, quote unquote, are performance enhancing, right? Now, these were actually 2 cases that happened in Major League Baseball or something to this effect. I'm forgetting the specifics. But the idea was, how do you deal with this, right? Like, these 2 seem similar, but which one works when? And then you can't do this at an abstract level. You have to descend into the particular, right? Like,
yeah, I hear the argument. Okay.
So here is where I'm getting at, is that if you tell me which right are we trying to preserve, because right to life, like you and I have agreed, can mean very little, right? It is that right to continue processing, which unobstructed. But in the case of one being, sure. But somebody is going to be producing them. Like, that does not change, because artificial intelligence...
Just like human beings.
No, but there is, look, even with human beings, right? Like, there is reproduction, there is like people get together, they decide to have an act, there's like some agreement or whatever. But I individually, let's suppose, producing these requires some energy or some draw on some resources where we all have to share. If I just give right to life to AI, any AI that starts must continue to process. Maybe not in 1, maybe not in 2. In the marginal case, maybe not. But when you extend this argument, ad infinitum, if I am just a mad producer of AI bots, right? I've just now produced 1 million AI bots that are just going all over the place, doing whatever. They may not be doing anything in particular incorrect, but it's just annoying, right? Like, for example, they all just decide to go every day in Bombay from, in the morning, they all decide to go from the airport towards Colaba or whatever, or from Borivali to Colaba, and they all move en masse. It is going to choke our roads, right? Like, at some point.
That for any Mumbaiker is sufficient reason to prevent
all AI, right? Like, I'm just like, nuke them, right? And then in the evening again, back again, right? Like, you can, and this can be innocuous behavior, right? They could actually be like, oh, they're all going to go work there, so we should also be there to help them, right? Like, it can emerge from that. At what point you will have to intervene somewhere and say, like, look, boss, this is the ethics of how you have to do it. So, in absolute terms, right, the universal declaration of human rights, right, the right to life, right, whatever, I would say comes from, I guess, familiarity of species and civilization over thousands of years. With these new creatures, whatever limitations we put on them, which we both agree in the base case, is that they cannot harm us in a way that we are already stopped other humans or whatever from
Correct.
harming us, right? Even if we've not explicitly said if a tiger comes and tries to kill us, we will kill it. There's no law. But at some level, we also recognize that the exceptions to whatever animal protection laws will say, unless some human is in grave danger, right? Some
Definitely.
I don't
Because
know the law.
human laws are human laws.
Human laws are human laws. So now if we see something behaving in that way, we've already put those limitations. That bot itself or the owner of that bot, whoever is responsible for deploying it, must be constrained by the same laws. That we already agree on.
Agreed.
Now, what is a sense of freedom or something to do, some obstruction that we humans can do to such an AI that you want to stop, right? That's a very interesting question, which I don't even know what it is. Because if you say right to processing, we are already putting that. We're already saying you can't make open source AI models. The California SB 1047 Act, that you can't train an AI with more than 10 raised to 26 or 10 raised to 27 flops, which is, by the way, just at the edge of where we are in terms of computational ability. So we're already saying that, like, in some sense, if there is a right to access more.
But I mean, how does that, what does that do? What is the goal of that sort of a law?
A lot of the AI safety arguments.
Right, so it's still human-centric, no? We are not preventing harm to AI.
No, of course. I mean, let's suppose if I had the ability, which, say, bonsai, bonsai trees, right? If I could bonsai animals, right?
Yeah.
At some point, if I started bonsaiing horses or tigers or whatever and started making them mini by not letting them access food, nutrition, whatever, it's actually in some sense, the opposite of the chicken argument, right? Like, we have just engineered chickens to be this so big and so whatever that their feet give away. Like, most of them can't move.
Yes.
Because we want meaty chickens.
Yeah.
And people are recognizing that's cruelty, right? So we're saying, hey, you shouldn't do this chicken. People are saying it's not happening, it's not stopped. But for AI, I'm asking you, what is the equivalent, right? It at some level will come down to the compute or the access to compute or not being able to do what you want to do, right? Like, my intention might be this way.
And so preventing a certain amount of compute from being given to a seemingly intelligent, silicon intelligent being by rule of law is an aberration of its quote-unquote rights.
Like, when I'm trying to ask you the particular question, because if you were to frame it that way, if you were to imagine it as a being that thrives on a different set of nutrition.
Yeah. I get the point that you're making. So maybe this is a good segue to the Age of M, right? Yeah. Do you want to describe the premise?
It's been a while, Deepak. You read this book more recently than I did, but I will try to take a stab at it, but you sort of correct me where I'm going wrong. The Age of M is a book by Robin Hanson. Robin Hanson, depending on where you sit, may have some very hot takes on every subject, right? In fact, I would go far as to say that Robin Hanson will upset you no matter which side of the aisle you sit on. A book that I earlier mentioned also, which is Elephant in the Brain, and this, both by Robin Hanson. Age of M. Age of M is Robin Hanson trying to be a futurist. He sort of the meta claim of the book is that we've stopped trying to even predict the future, right? Like, we all have become so risk averse in saying something wrong or whatever that we don't really stick our neck out, go out on a limb and make any prediction of the future. So he wanted to make a prediction of what happens 200 years or so from now. And he wanted to sort of use his grounding of sociology, of humanities, of what he understands of the world economics to take a guess at what the future looks like. The basic premise, the basic invention which sort of drives all of this is the idea of EMs, right? M's as they call it. Emulated...
just short forms for emulations.
For emulation, for short form for emulations, right? Which is essentially we'll have the ability to download our brain into these silicon intelligences. Somewhere it becomes this now a new hybrid kind of species between our meat intelligence and our silicon intelligence argument, where a emulation of your brain has your entire memory, history, experience, whatever is downloaded onto a silicon which is running this brain model which sort of mimics you, and therefore somewhere on some silicon you exist, and he calls this EMs, so M's, and therefore this is the age of M's. And then he goes on to say that under this fundamental premise, what will society look like, what are the haves, have-nots, what are the kind of things that happen, not happen, the politics of this age, etc., and just sort of expounds on that and lays out certain ideas. Deepak, what am I missing? And this is the premise.
No, this
of
is the perfect premise. So it's just a way to capture a model of your brain at a snapshot in time inside a thing that has a processor that is able to emulate a human brain. And I think what was interesting about the premise of the book was it feels like human beings are almost an afterthought. It is a book that focuses on M's and what they do, what the economy looks like, just the world and age of M's, and not so much about the relationship between humans and M's or where human beings are in the whole process. And again, part of the initial hypothesis for him was he was saying that every time a great leap has taken place in an age, so farming or the Industrial Revolution, population growth has exponentially changed. And he thinks that in the age of M, you would double population of M's at like 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, the population of M's just simply doubles. Or at least you're creating so many M's. Also, there is a class hierarchy of M's. So if human processing is at a level 1, then you have giga M's, which process faster than humans do, nano M's that are a fraction of it. So they source from human beings because it is a human brain that starts off. But M's can create more M's. And so for example, he talks about a plumber who wants to do plumbing. And so the M will create 5 other M's, all of whom go into 2 hours of work each. And then each M, I mean, the plumber has conducted 10 hours of work, but each M has the memory of having done only 2 hours of work. And so the argument is anytime you simply don't want to remember something, M it, right? And if that's even a way to say it. And the M will just sort of conduct that activity for you. Now, we've been talking about various types of intelligence. And maybe the way to bring it top down is we've taken Dolly the sheep and made a second sheep. And the second sheep is like the first sheep because it's cloning. If I were to take Tanuj the human and make a second human, is that intelligence or is that only artificial intelligence? Is that conscious?
That's conscious and that's intelligence, right? Like I think the question with clones is not is it intelligence? It is essentially literally the same matter.
Yeah.
The question you ask is it Tanuj, right? Is it the same individual fundamentally, right? Even if one is, of course, in actual physical cloning as we know it, it's not the same memories, it's not the same experiences, all of that. But in this thought exercise, you're even taking that snapshot in time and passing it along. So now it still brings up a very sort of interesting, is it still Tanuj or not?
Right, but you could just say, okay, you are Tanuj V0 and that's Tanuj V1. And there's a nomenclature to track every time you've cloned something. And up until that point, you're all identical. But since from that moment in time, you'll have different inputs, you'll have different outputs. So you'll start becoming different people. If I were to do the brain scan version of it and download your brain onto silicon, but it's capable of running in an identical way to a clone, is that intelligent and conscious? That's the question.
Okay. So the presupposition, of course, is that you've managed to take everything that exists in my brain and my meat body and somehow put
Which
it
is
there.
a collection of atoms.
It's a collection of atoms.
We have not been able to capture anything ineffable because that is not even possible.
True. But essentially, the one thing that I want to say, right, the substrate kind of matters in my conception of these things, right? Which is what I was trying to get at earlier, that you can, for example, even today, train a model to emulate the likeness of Tanuj, right? Both in video, in audio, and in text. So you give it all the emails I've ever written. You give it all my photos, whatever, videos where I'm speaking, so my mannerisms and the way I move my hands when I talk, everything is available. And you could ask it to create a likeness of me, and it will. And it will consistently produce things. And if you ask me certain things, it will respond in a certain way. Fundamentally still you wouldn't agree that this is me.
But it's playing a character.
It's playing a character.
It's not being the character.
Yes. It's again, see, playing the character again. In the way we frame these terms, it can seem very easy to and it can seem like I'm being stubborn about this, very obstinate.
No, which you should be. That's the whole point of the podcast.
Yeah. I'm being very obstinate about the fact that this new Tanuj, would it really know what desire is, right? Would it really have that visceral experience and understanding of desire? Even though you may have every input output I've taken and put it there. Even let's say So there are two different systems, right? I want to talk about the current AI system and the other version
yeah.
where you're downloading the atoms. So the current version of these AI systems would be that it takes every input output that Tanuj has written and tries to emulate a model of Tanuj in its own silicon architecture or whatever. Here I can confidently say this is not a being, this is not alive, right? Because it would, like, for example, not know what desires. It does not know what is that thing that Tanuj really say appreciates about my partner, right? Like,
but if no, it would, right? Because it
like, how many times have you actually said to the people you love that this is the thing that you do because of which I love you?
Right, but if it has a collection of the same memories you have, okay, which is the claim,
which is the claim, which is the other thing that I would also come back to and say, right? Like, you download the exact atoms and put it there. By the time you figured that out, it is much more likely that you would have figured out how to recreate the equivalent architecture de novo in silicon and then train it to be its own being before you could probably essentially capture our sort of memories and everything and put it down there. Like, one is, I will make the argument, it's a harder thing to do than it is to create intelligence, because you're like, literally you have to understand where it's stored, what it's stored. We know memories are fallible, right? We know that you will, like, you literally, I can prompt you into coming up with something in your childhood and you will recollect it also, something that never happened. So our memories are also fallible. The fact that even if I were to see somebody who looks a lot like my partner, right? But if they did not say the same things or behave the same way, like, it would trigger something in me, right? Like,
but again, this whole question of it is a being now. If I were to go and so for example, something traumatic happened to you in your childhood, and I were to whisper into its ear something that triggered that trauma and explicitly tortured this silicon download of your brain. Would you not be for that being problematic, or would you just be like, it's a fucking machine, it's a computer basically? So this is like beating up a guy in GTA 5, right?
It's actually a great example, right? Like, at some point, NPCs are going to be Gen AI generated, right? Because it's just going to make the NPCs.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
In game, you mean?
In game.
Yeah.
Your non-playing characters are going to at some point be AI. Like, I can see that example happening. It's already probably happening, right? Like, where instead of them saying these, lines which are static, they'll start saying stuff based on what happened and what you did, right? Like, they would give them some things about Deepak, right? Which is like, so Deepak took this car and jumped off a cliff and then, jumped into a plane and then flew that plane and go and saved the day.
Yeah.
The NPCs will know that and start talking, saying that to you, right? You will still probably kill that NPC, and I still believe it's completely fine to do so. See, even if it is the emulation of a real person, it is not a real person.
Because it's on silicon.
Because of the substrate. Yes, because it's on silicon. Because I think that there is something about our biological systems, our meatiness, that actually gives rise to everything else, right? It is the fact that, I was giving this example earlier, that the fact that even you and the way you think, when you are sick versus when you are not, right? You have every intelligence or whatever. What is it? Your calcium levels may be low, your B12 is something, your body temperature is a little high, which theoretically you should think does not make any difference to your brain as a neural network. But it does.
Certainly does. Something about my programming changes.
The decisions you make, how risk averse you are, right? What you bias towards. There's a bunch of it which looks and feels like you. And I feel like the rights that we've come up with are also recognitions of that premise and that, that fairness example I was talking about, where even the monkey rejects that cucumber and humans want fairness from each other. That qualia comes from like something in the substrate.
So claim is that the monkey is not mimicking a feeling of unfairness. It is feeling a feeling of unfairness.
Exactly. Like, that's essentially where I'm coming at, right? Like, it is not that I see a situation, I know I should be angry, right? Because it's the same thing. In-group, out-group behavior for the same exact action is different, right? So if I think somebody looks like me and they make a joke, the classic political example, right? Like, somebody says something and you're like, how dare you, right? If they're on the opposite side. And if somebody says yours thing, haha, that's satire, you should be able to take it, right? Like if your side says something nasty, I give this example. I work with Nandan Nilekani, right? Like a bunch of people, when I was on Aadhaar side, I realized that a bunch of people that I thought were fairly progressive and like, whatever, were out in the open hunting season to say whatever and whoever about everybody working on these things. Including some good friends of mine made a comic in which the punchline was Nandan getting hit by a bus. Right? And widely shared. And I was like, guys, like this is depicting somebody, like the punchline is that this person dies. That's it. I mean, it's derogatory. There was him in a diaper and all, which is fine. But I'm like, but the punchline is this man dying. Right? That's it. Literally, like I don't even know what's funny about that. Very objectively, right? Like it's not like I have to defend him. He also, I know, is made of thick skin. So it's not that I care, but I just wanted to, what shocked me was how my own in-group was okay with the comic. And I was like, but it's depicting this, right? Like, imagine if I were to just say, whatever, like somebody gets hit by a bus, right?
So the lack of nuance.
The lack of nuance when it comes to your in-group is a very human thing, right? We are not objective at all. And all of it comes from our meatiness.
Okay, so a final question to wrap up,
Yeah.
which is the demand for a steel man. It's how I try to end each of these.
Yeah.
If over the last few hours we've sort of touched on all the things that AI can potentially move, from helping a developer write code better, which could just change how we use the internet overall, how many developers we hire, to how many billions of dollars can be earned simply through AI, through it fundamentally changing the definition of what it means to be intelligent. Like we've now created a parallel way of being intelligent, to question begging on consciousness. Are we even conscious for us to even make the claim that something else is or isn't conscious? To law, rights, which will certainly become like a fairly meaningful problem, to potentially this being the start of other types of AI that are not, for example, transformer-based, but whole new ways to emulate intelligence, to asking questions like, is it mimicking intelligence or is it being intelligent? How do you know the difference? How is the hype not justified? Or if you had to make the case for the hype being justified, is this a good enough place to start?
So, cool. I think, while we didn't get into the pragmatic things of the world of this, let me just tell you where AI is going to make a difference to our lives in the next few years.
Yeah.
Number one, of course, coding becomes easier, which means that all sorts of tool building for specific purpose becomes easier. This results in more people using more software to do things where they wouldn't have done things or paid a lot. Which means that newer form of organizations become very possible. Specialists with AI, the place I work is called People+AI, is because this is a funding thesis that we have, that humans with AI, like you said, are replacing humans without AI. The humans with AI become reasonably more productive. Certain tasks get automated away where you don't even need, like you yourself with minimal training are the human that gets the output of the AI, as opposed to a specialist on that AI.
Right.
All of this results, according to me, in smaller firms being able to do larger economic outputs, as opposed to an AI that does great economic value, which is the definition of AGI.
Got it.
So that principle of smaller firms being able to do this, there being more such firms, to me is the fundamental shift that we will see in the next few years, because it's just better. Like you ask anyone who's worked in a large team, bureaucracy, organization, etc., you would rather be with a smaller group and tribe where you get everything and understand everything. And some of these people will do very, very well. Will our capital systems allow this, or will they still prefer larger companies, because larger capital chases larger pools, and if you have a larger place to absorb or whatever. So it might take a few things around finance to make this happen, where we are able to fund these smaller teams, which I think we're actually fairly there. It's not really hard to do, but like it's just that somebody has to recognize that this is the direction it will go, and somebody will create an instrument to fund many more teams. This is the first thing that will change. The second thing that it changes is access. There is a lot of the world, as much as you and I also, Deepak, are in Bangalore, in Silicon Valley of India, etc. The reality of this country is that a lot of people don't even have access to basic things that they should have had a long, long time ago. As they often say, the future is already here, it's not evenly distributed. I see AI as a great way to evenly distribute that future, because already what we are seeing with productivity is that the top end of productivity, the frontier of genius, of novelty is not changing, but average is rising up very, very fast. So think about writing a letter in English, right? Writing a formal letter. There was a time when some people, even around you from your college, maybe not feel so confident in the language, would not have written certain letter, or they would have gone to somebody to review or whatever. Today, a computer is doing that. Like for most people, they're just, sort of the bane of that is also that the most cover letters I now receive are no longer meaningful.
I was about to say that. I think the test will just change, right? It'll no longer be quality of English.
Quality of English. But the fact is that you can at least communicate your ideas better, right? So while we had coded that, overloaded that function of English to also then essentially determine your class and status and education or whatever, that might go away. We need to find new tests. In fact, that is the other sort of, if I want to go into the negative effect of society, the negative effect of society is that everything that we've thought of as trust systems is breaking down. Every review is now meaningless, right? You can write a code to generate reviewers who will then go and review and write eloquent reviews and make all the points that you want to make.
And upload those reviews.
And everything, right? And generate photos showing real people holding your product, such that ye hai. There's already a company recently that is saying that you take a brand or like a digital creator, like a influencer, and we'll give you 30 versions of that influencer saying whatever statement. Now you go put those videos in your different marketing channels, A/B test them, and then figure out which one you want.
Amazing.
You don't have to keep shooting with that influencer. A podcast like this may just be that you and I, Deepak, exchange some emails, and eventually our AI likeness sits and make this.
No
right?
guarantee that's not already happening.
That video is probably, if you want to see that. Okay, so these are all sort of changes that will definitely happen. Like I feel like the economic unit or the unit of organization becomes smaller because the smaller set of people can do more. They become more specialized. This has a ripple effect through the economy on services, of course. But I think this will start becoming true when this becomes embodied in robots, right? Like, so then manufacturing, doing all of that, right? Like starts becoming easier. Like if I want something, I want a thing that does this. Should I go build my own, right? Or like have an AI build one custom exactly to my requirements? Take something like earphones, right? Earphones fit for your ear would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But there is a sound driver system in there that is standard, right? So why can't I just get an AI to scan my ears and 3D print the outcare case and I just order the thing, right? Which will be better for everybody involved, right? So those also I see changes that can start happening once we get into AI doing robotics better and doing whatever better. Do jobs go away? Like let's ask that critical question. Do jobs go away? No. Fundamentally, because the ineffable of human culture and human experience, right? Always keeps shifting. The role of understanding the zeitgeist and then creating something that people want will still be human. I cannot see that going away. I also told you about systems like healthcare, where you need an authority to assure you that all these machines are being run well. I want a doctor to tell me that the AI suggestion is correct, makes sense, even if the suggestion comes from an AI. So there are places, especially where it is, and then there is obviously the absolute social interaction bit, which I don't think we can do away with. My friend might be a less interesting conversationalist than the most advanced AI. But there is a certain qualia to talking to another human being who has points of view and, disagrees, and like doing this, what you and I are doing, Deepak, does not go away. So even if it becomes like therapy is just, at some level you're talking to somebody, you're talking to what would have been a role that would have been a mentor or whatever. We just professionalized it and made it a professional transaction. But we need that. Like the more individual we get, the more this actually becomes a professional economic service. So I would not be worried about jobs going away. Of course, your job will look very different. Of course, the profession itself may not exist, but social media influencer didn't exist, Data analyst was not a role 20 years ago.
Of course, yeah.
Those things happen. I think many people have made the point before me. Productivity gains will be good, but they have that Red Queen effect, right? Where Alice is running faster to say in the same place. So if you look at a good example is social media itself, right? There was a time when you could upload a very vapid video, just like, talk to the camera, no nothing, no whatever, and you'd be like on Vine, you would be very hit and popular. And we've reached a stage now where even a basic influencer has to put up lighting, camera, tripod, do a bunch of stuff, because like the expectation and the quality from the viewer has also increased, right? So personally, that I don't think the net jobs in the economy go away, because essentially, if everything became free, labor became free, whatever, everything became free, the idea of humans desiring to be special, wanting to be better than their peers will never go away. And that we will differentiate, we will learn how to differentiate and do based on some skill that the AI does not have yet. Like we will go into those search functions and we will find those things that an AI can't do. And we will start valuing those precisely because they are rare, precisely because others can't have them.
And it's a show of skill.
It's a show of skill, and it's a way of like saying, look, I'm better than you, right? So personally, I wouldn't be incredibly worried about these things. I would be worried more about things like spam call, losing trust systems. Like everybody is basically falling for the trap, right? Like, I mean, the early internet was essentially just this, right? And then we had responses to that with like Amazons or whatever, where you go and trusted, or eBay with buyer protection, etc. Right? Like every time this has happened, I think this is how we respond. I do see therefore a lot of opportunity for us to build and to make things. Access will increase, right? I think access to expertise has always been hard to democratize. Like there are many intelligent children in India, but only a few of them got to attend great universities, right? Can we change that meaningfully? Those are the questions. Healthcare, similarly, right? Like doctors, again, you may still want to go to a doctor, but at least access to what should be done to, soothe or...
Yeah, this sounds like the internet and mobile phones and all that.
Right. And all of them were hailed as revolutionary, right? And they've both... they've delivered, but also like not delivered enough in both all the time. This happens because obviously one, we exaggerate, we hype, which is my claim that it is overhyped. But the second is that we are unable to imagine the feedback, what we do as a response to technology, right? Which is a large part of my argument for what makes us intelligent, right? Like we react and have agency, and therefore if I see somebody doing something and getting away with it or becoming more popular than me, then I also do it, right? Like a lot of internet entrepreneurs who seem to have done it all, made it, etc. Now in the age of AI, like, oh shit, I need to be a second time founder building on AI, etc. Right? Like this guy's doing it, that guy's doing it, this guy's doing it. I also need to do something. That is a very meat intelligence response.
Right? Both as a factor of agency and as a factor of a group, and some culture substrate that exists in that group.
I would say it's irrelevance. I would say that the age of AI seems so promising to all of these entrepreneurs that literally what would go away is legacy, right? Like I think a lot of the reason why a lot of people are jumping back into the game is because you will be forgotten. And I think at some level, whether you want to admit it or not, you care about that, right? So I think because like it's like we were discussing The Graduate, right? Plastics, right? The Ambani, the Mukesh and Dhirubhai Ambani, Mukesh and Anil Ambani were born in the age of plastics. So plastics was the thing, right? Everybody had to get into plastics. And then Akash and Shloka and others are born into the age of digital. So there is Jio, right? So if you ask me, is that cycle will keep continuing. Like there's no way that changes. I just think the fundamental changes, like if internet where geography started mattering a little less, with Lexity where access to, peat or coal in your immediate neighborhood mattered less. I think with AI sort of your starting skill level will matter less, right? But society will remain society.
And people.
Yeah.
Okay, well, to somebody listening to this decades hence, you now know how it all turned out. Thank you, Tanuj, for making the time. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Deepak. It was very enjoyable. I didn't realize how these many hours have passed so quickly. But yeah, we should definitely revisit this in a decade to see how wrong.
I agree fully.
we were. All right, lovely.